They say an alpha female is born, not made. But what happens when the woman destined to rule is cast aside like trash on the night she was promised everything? Lyra Vale stood at the altar believing she'd finally claim her birthright, only to watch the man she loved choose another woman in front of the entire pack. They thought the fire took her that night. They were wrong. What crawled out of those flames wasn't the broken girl they betrayed. It was something far more dangerous. If you want to see how a rejected mate becomes the most feared wolf in every kingdom, you better stick around until the end of this story. And hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I know my pack is listening. The northern wind carried ash and the scent of burning cedar through the Vale Pack territory. But Lyra barely noticed. She stood before the mirror in the Luna's preparation chamber, her fingers trembling as she traced the silver embroidery on her ceremonial gown. White silk, ancient runes stitched in moonstone thread. The dress had been worn by every Luna in the Draven bloodline for 200 years. Tonight, it would finally be hers. 23 years she had waited for this. 23 years of standing beside Kyle Draven, training with him, hunting with him, bleeding with him. She had been 8 years old when the Pack Elders first whispered that she and Kyle were destined, two dominant bloodlines joining to create an unbreakable alliance. She had been 12 when she realized she loved him, 15 when he first kissed her under the old oak at the border, 18 when he promised her forever. And now, at 23, forever had finally arrived. "You look like a ghost." Lyra turned to find her mother standing in the doorway, face tight with something that wasn't quite happiness. Elena Vale had been a beauty once, before her mate died and left her to raise Lyra alone in a pack that barely tolerated wolves without alphas to protect them. "I'm nervous," Lyra admitted. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "You should be." Elena stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Once you accept the Luna bond, there's no going back. You'll be tied to Kyle and this pack until one of you dies." "I know the laws, Mother." "Do you?" Elena's eyes were hard. "Do you know what it means to stand beside a man who can break you with a single command? To build your entire existence around someone else's power?" Lyra felt heat rise in her chest. Kale would never... Kale is an alpha. Elena's words cut like glass. And alphas protect the pack first. Always. Don't forget that. Before Lyra could respond, 3 sharp knocks echoed through the chamber. The ceremonial summons. It was time. Her mother's expression softened, just barely. She reached out and tucked a strand of dark hair behind Lyra's ear. "I hope I'm wrong about him, little moon. I really do." Then she was gone, and Lyra was alone with the weight of the dress and the thunder of her own heartbeat. The Moonbond ceremony took place in the ancient stone circle at the heart of Pack territory. Hundreds of wolves gathered in the clearing, their eyes reflecting silver in the torchlight. Lyra could feel their stares as she walked down the pathway of white stones, each step bringing her closer to the raised platform where Kyle waited. He looked like something carved from granite and starlight. 6'4", broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that made other wolves drop their eyes. Dark hair pulled back from sharp features, ice blue eyes that could strip flesh from bone with a glance. He wore the traditional alpha's coat, black leather marked with the Draven crest in silver. When those eyes found hers, Lyra's breath caught. This was real. This was happening. But as she climbed the steps to the platform, something felt wrong. Kale's expression was blank. Not cold exactly, but absent, like he was somewhere else entirely. And the pack, they weren't watching her with joy or celebration. They were watching her with pity. The elder stepped forward, ancient and bent, carrying the ceremonial blade that would bind their blood. "We gather beneath the full moon to witness the joining of Alpha and Luna, Wait." The word came from Kyle, and it shattered the night like breaking glass. Lyra froze. "What?" Kyle wouldn't look at her. His jaw was tight, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. "I can't do this." The world tilted. Lyra reached for the edge of the platform to steady herself. "What are you talking about?" "The bond. I can't accept it." 4 words, simple, devastating. Lyra's voice came out broken. "Kale, if this is about your father's death, we talked about this. You're ready to lead. We're ready." "It's not about that." He finally met her eyes, and what she saw there made her stomach drop. Guilt, resolve, and something worse, relief. I've made my choice, Lyra, and it's not you. The pack erupted in whispers. Lyra heard her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, felt her wolf clawing at her ribs, desperate and confused. I don't understand. Her hands were shaking so badly the moonstone beads on her dress rattled. We've been planning this for years. You said, you promised. I know what I said. Kale's voice was flat. I was wrong. Wrong? The word tasted like poison. You were wrong about us? About me? About what the pack needs? He turned away from her then, addressing the crowd. The Veil Pack stands at the edge of war. The northern territories are collapsing, and we need alliances that will keep us strong. Lyra is... He hesitated, and that hesitation hurt worse than anything else. She's not enough. Not enough. The words carved into her chest like claws. Then who? Lyra's voice cracked. Who's enough, Kael? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because that's when she appeared. A woman stepped out from the crowd, moving with the kind of confidence that made wolves part before her. Tall, elegant, with pale blonde hair and amber eyes that gleamed with triumph. Seraphina Blackwood, daughter of the most powerful pack in the Eastern Territories, a strategic alliance wrapped in beauty and breeding. And Kael's secret. Seraphina climbed the platform steps like she owned them. When she reached Kael's side, she placed one perfectly manicured hand on his arm, claiming him in front of everyone. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Seraphina said, her voice honey-sweet and sharp as a blade. But surely you understand. The pack needs strength, not sentiment. Lyra couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She looked at Kael, searching for anything, anger, regret, shame. But he just stood there, letting this woman touch him, letting her words slice Lyra open in front of 300 witnesses. How long? Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. Kael's jaw tightened. That doesn't matter. How long, Kael? 6 months, Seraphina answered for him, smiling. We've been planning the alliance since spring. Honestly, I'm surprised he waited this long to tell you. That's Kael, though, too kind for his own good. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of Lyra planning a future that was already dead. She looked down at her dress, the dress she had imagined wearing since she was a child, the dress that now felt like a burial shroud. When she looked back up, Kael was finally watching her, and for just a second she saw pain flash across his face. Good. She hoped it killed him. You're a coward. Her voice was steady now, cold. You could have told me weeks ago, months ago, but you let me walk down here in front of everyone wearing this... She gestured at the gown. You let me believe... I tried to tell you. Kael's composure cracked. I tried to find the right time. There is no right time to destroy someone. The words ripped out of her. You just didn't want to be the villain, so you waited until I was standing here in front of the whole damn pack so they could all watch you humiliate me. Lyra, up. Don't. She stepped back, shaking her head. Don't say my name. Don't apologize. Just... Her voice broke. Just tell me one thing. Did you ever love me? Or was I always just a placeholder until something better came along? The silence that followed was answer enough. Lyra turned and walked down the platform steps. Each one felt like falling. The crowd parted before her, their faces a blur of pity and fascination. She could hear them whispering. Poor thing. She really thought she'd be Luna. Should have known better. Werewolves never rise that high. Her mother was waiting at the edge of the clearing, face carved from stone. She didn't say anything, just opened her arms and Lyra walked into them, feeling like a child again. Broken. Worthless. Not enough. Take me home, Lyra whispered. Elena held her tighter. We don't have a home anymore, baby. Not in this pack. And that's when Lyra understood. By rejecting her in front of everyone, Kael hadn't just broken her heart. He destroyed her standing, her future, everything she'd built her life around. Veil wolves without alpha protection were nothing, less than nothing. They were prey. Lyra spent the next 3 hours in her mother's cottage, still wearing the white dress, staring at nothing. Elena moved around her, packing bags with mechanical efficiency. 2 lives condensed into canvas and leather. By dawn, They'd leave Vale territory and never come back. You should change, Elena said quietly. That dress is worth more than everything else we own. We can sell it. Lyra looked down at the silk and moonstone, the dress that was supposed to make her Luna, the dress that now marked her as the pack's greatest joke. Burn it. Lyra, shh. I said burn it. She stood, yanking at the laces with shaking fingers. The fabric tore. She didn't care. She wanted it off. Wanted everything from tonight gone, erased, forgotten. But when she finally stood in just her shift, shivering in the cold room, burning the dress wouldn't be enough. She could feel it in her bones. The weight of tonight would follow her forever. The girl who almost became Luna. The girl who wasn't enough. A knock at the door made them both freeze. Elena moved to answer it, but Lyra caught her arm. Don't. It might be important. I don't care. The knock came again, harder. Then a voice, male, urgent. Lyra, open up. It's Marcus. Marcus Thorne. Kale's beta. The man who'd helped train her, who'd treated her like a little sister for years. Lyra wanted to tell him to go to hell, but Elena was already opening the door. Marcus stood on the threshold, rain-soaked and breathing hard. His usually calm face was twisted with something like panic. You need to leave, he said without preamble. Right now. Elena stiffened. We're packing. There's no time. Marcus stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He looked at Lyra, and she saw genuine fear in his eyes. Seraphina's been talking to the Pack Council. She's convinced them you're a threat. Lyra laughed, sharp and bitter. A threat? I'm nobody. You're a rejected mate who knows too much about Pack politics, about Kael, about the Alliance. Marcus grabbed her shoulders. Seraphina doesn't want you alive to tell stories, and the Council agrees it's cleaner if you just disappear. The words took a moment to sink in. When they did, Lyra felt her blood turn to ice. They're going to kill me? They're going to make it look like an accident. Marcus released her, running a hand through his wet hair. There's a fire. Started about 20 minutes ago near the northern cliffs. It's spreading fast. By morning, they'll say you got caught in it. Tragic. Unavoidable. Elena moved between them and the door, her eyes wild. Kael would never. Kael's locked in the Alpha's chambers. Marcus's voice was flat. Seraphina made sure of it. Said he needed time to adjust to the new bond. He doesn't even know what's happening. Lyra's wolf surged inside her, all teeth and rage. So his future mate is trying to murder me, and he's just letting it happen? He doesn't know, Marcus repeated. But they both heard the unspoken truth. Kael had made his choice. He'd chosen Seraphina, chosen the Alliance, and now Lyra was paying the price. How long do we have? Elena's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking as she reached for their bags. Minutes, maybe less. Marcus pulled a set of keys from his pocket and pressed them into Lyra's hand. There's a truck waiting behind the eastern border. Take the fire roads north until you hit the river, then follow it west. Don't stop, don't come back. Lyra stared at the keys. Cold metal. A different future. One where she ran like prey instead of standing her ground. Why are you helping us? She asked. Marcus met her eyes. Because I've known you since you were 10 years old. And because what's happening tonight is wrong. He glanced at Elena. Get her out of here, please. The smell of smoke was stronger now, seeping through the walls. Lyra could hear shouts in the distance. The fire was close. Elena grabbed her arm. We have to go. Now. But Lyra pulled free, moving to the window. She could see flames on the hillside, orange and hungry, spreading toward the cottage. And between the fire and the house, she could see wolves, not running from the blaze, running toward it, toward her. They're not even hiding it, she whispered. Marcus cursed. Back door, go. They ran. Quote, the next 10 minutes were chaos and smoke and the thunder of paws behind them. Elena shifted mid-stride, her wolf form faster and stronger than her human body. She grabbed Lyra's shift in her teeth and pulled, urging her to shift too. But Lyra couldn't. Her wolf was there, clawing at her ribs, but something was broken. The bond she'd expected to solidify tonight, the connection between human and beast that the Luna ceremony would have completed, was fractured. Incomplete. She was stuck between forms, too human to run on 4 legs, too wolf to think clearly. So she ran on 2 legs, stumbling through the forest in nothing but her thin shift, feet bleeding on rocks and roots, lungs burning with smoke and terror. Behind them, the fire roared, and beneath it, she could hear voices, shouting, coordinating. They weren't just letting the fire take her, they were herding her toward it. Elena's wolf darted ahead, leading them toward the eastern border. But when they broke through the tree line, Lyra's heart sank. The truck was there, but so were 3 wolves standing between them and escape. Elena snarled, positioning herself between Lyra and the threat. The largest wolf, a massive gray male, shifted, and Lyra recognized him. Garrett Cross, one of Seraphina's personal guards. "Nothing personal, Vale," Garrett said, flexing his shoulders. "Just business." "Let us go." Lyra's voice was hoarse from smoke. "We'll leave the territory. You'll never see us again." "Can't do that." Garrett tilted his head. The Blackwood Luna gave very specific orders. No loose ends. The Blackwood Luna. That's what Seraphina was now. Less than 2 hours after destroying Lyra's life, she'd already claimed the title. Lyra's wolf finally surged forward, and this time she didn't fight it. The shift was agony, bones breaking and reforming wrong, fur erupting from skin that wasn't ready. But when it was done, she stood on 4 legs, smaller than Elena, but faster, angrier. She'd never killed another wolf before, but tonight she was willing to learn. Garrett shifted back and the fight began. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't honorable. 3 against 2, with smoke choking the air and fire closing in on all sides. Elena fought like a demon, taking down 1 wolf and wounding another. But Garrett was stronger, faster. He caught Elena by the throat and slammed her into a tree hard enough that Lyra heard bones crack. "No!" Lyra lunged at him, teeth bared. Garrett swatted her aside like she was nothing. She hit the ground hard, tasting blood. Through blurred vision, she saw him standing over her mother's still form. "She's done," he said. "You're next." Lyra tried to stand, but her back leg wouldn't hold. Broken. Everything was broken. Garrett shifted, looming over her in human form. "For what it's worth, I heard you would have made a decent Luna, better than the Ice Queen we're stuck with now." He raised his foot. "But the strong survive. And you, sweetheart, were never strong enough." The boot came down toward her skull. Lyra closed her eyes, and then the world exploded. Not the boot, not Garrett. The fire. The blaze had reached the fuel cache Marcus must have stashed near the truck. The explosion threw Garrett backward, engulfing him in flames. His screams cut through the night. The other wolves scattered, more afraid of burning alive than finishing their kill. Lyra dragged herself toward her mother. Elena was breathing, barely. Blood matted her fur. Too much blood. "Mom!" Lyra shifted back to human, ignoring the fresh agony. "Mom, stay with me!" Elena's eyes opened, gold flecked with red. She shifted too, using the last of her strength. "Run," she whispered. Blood bubbled at her lips. "The river, north." "I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are." Elena's hand found Lyra's face. "You're going to survive this. You're going to become something they can't destroy." Her breathing rattled. "Promise me." "Mom, promise." Lyra's throat closed. "I promise." Elena smiled. It was small and sad and final. Then her eyes went distant, and the hand on Lyra's cheek fell away. For a long moment, Lyra knelt there in the dirt and ash, holding her mother's body, feeling something inside her chest splinter into pieces that would never fit back together. Then the fire roared closer, and survival instinct kicked in. She ran. The northern cliffs overlooked a river that cut through the territory like a black vein. Lyra reached the edge with flames at her back and nowhere else to go. The drop was 60 feet, jagged rocks, white water. Behind her she heard voices. The wolves had regrouped. She looked down at the water, looked back at the fire, at the pack that had raised her, and then decided she was expendable. "Not strong enough," she whispered. Garrett's words. Kael's rejection. Her mother's warning. All of it condensed into 3 words that had defined her entire life. Well, if she was going to die, she'd rather drown than burn. Lyra jumped. The fall seemed to last forever. wind screaming past her ears, smoke and stars above her. Then the water hit like concrete, driving the air from her lungs, pulling her under. Cold. So cold it stopped her heart. The current grabbed her and dragged her downstream. She tried to swim, but her broken leg was useless, and her arms had no strength left. Her head broke the surface once, long enough to gasp a breath and see the sky. Then the river pulled her down again, and the world went black. Geek. When consciousness returned, it came in pieces, sand beneath her cheek, rough and cold, the smell of rotting fish and river mud, pain, everywhere. Lyra opened her eyes and saw gray dawn light filtering through mist. She was on a narrow beach, miles downstream from Vale territory. Her body was a map of agony, broken bones, torn muscles, deep gashes that should have killed her. But she was alive. She tried to laugh, but it came out as a sob. Alive. After everything, she was still breathing. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Crunching through sand and gravel. Lyra tried to move, to shift, to defend herself, but her body was done. She could barely lift her head. The footsteps stopped. A shadow fell across her. "Well," a voice said, female, amused. "Look what the river dragged in." Lyra forced her eyes to focus. The woman standing over her was maybe 40, with silver-streaked black hair and scars that cut across her face like war paint. She wore leather and carried enough weapons to start a small war. "You smell like smoke in Vale territory," the woman continued, "which means you're either running from something or running towards something worse. So which is it, girl? You prey? Or are you something more interesting?" Lyra coughed, tasting blood. "They tried to kill me." "Clearly." The woman crouched down, studying her with sharp gray eyes. "And you jumped off a cliff instead of dying quiet. That takes spine." She tilted her head. "What's your name?" Lyra thought about that. Thought about the girl who'd stood on that platform in a white dress, waiting for a future that never came. That girl was dead, burned in the fire, drowned in the river. "I don't have one anymore," she whispered. The woman smiled. It was all teeth. "Perfect. Then you can earn a new one." She stood, offering her hand. "I run a syndicate. We deal in things other wolves are too scared or too soft to touch. Information, weapons, power. I can make you strong enough that no one ever throws you away again." Her eyes glinted. "But it won't be easy, and it won't be clean. You up for that?" Lyra stared at that offered hand. She thought about Kael's face when he said she wasn't enough, about Seraphina's smile, about her mother's body in the dirt, about every wolf who'd watched her humiliation and done nothing. She thought about the promise she'd made, to survive, to become something they couldn't destroy. Lyra took the woman's hand. "Good," the woman said, pulling her up. "Let's see what kind of monster you can become." And somewhere in Vale territory, standing in the ruins of a burned cottage, Kael Draven stared at the ashes and felt his wolf howl with a loss he couldn't name. They told him Lyra was dead, that the fire had taken her before anyone could stop it. Tragic, unavoidable. He should have felt relief. The complication was gone. His path was clear. Instead, he felt like something vital had been carved out of his chest. "It's better this way," Seraphina said beside him, her hand cold on his arm. "She would have made everything harder." Kael didn't answer. He just kept staring at the ashes, wondering why they smelled like lies. But by then, Lyra Vale was already miles away, learning her first lesson in survival from a woman who didn't believe in mercy. And the girl who'd begged for Kael's love was dying with every mile, making room for something sharper, colder, something that would one day make alpha wolves kneel. The woman's name was Rhea Cross, and she didn't believe in second chances. Lyra learned that within the first hour of consciousness. Rhea had dragged her to a camp hidden in the neutral zone between territories, a place where exiled wolves, deserters, and things worse than both gathered like vultures around a carcass. The compound was all corrugated metal and razor wire, built into the side of a cliff that overlooked nothing but wasteland. They threw Lyra into a cell that smelled like rust and old blood. No bed, no blankets, just concrete and the sound of her own breathing. She stayed there for 3 days. No food, no water, no explanations. On the 4th day, Rhea appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, watching Lyra try to stand on a leg that still hadn't healed right. "So you're still alive," Rhea said. "Interesting." Lyra's throat was raw. "Why am I here?" "Because I wanted to see if you'd beg." Rhea stepped into the cell. Most wolves start crying by day 2, promising loyalty, offering anything, just for a drink of water. But you just sat there, bleeding and quiet. That tells me something. "What?" "That you're either too proud or too broken, and I don't have use for broken things." Rhea pulled a canteen from her belt and tossed it. Lyra caught it, barely. "Drink, then we talk." The water tasted like metal and salvation. Lyra forced herself to sip slowly, even though her body screamed to gulp it down. Control. That's what this was about. Rhea was testing whether she could still think past her own desperation. When the canteen was half empty, Lyra lowered it and met Rhea's eyes. "What do you want from me?" "Everything." Rhea smiled. "Your old life, your old name, whatever honor or morality you've been clinging to. I want all of it gone. Because the girl who walked into that ceremony hall, she's worthless to me. But the woman who chose the river over the fire, she might be worth training. Training for what? To be the thing wolves fear when they close their eyes." Rhea crouched down to Lyra's level. "I run the Shadow Crescent Syndicate. We deal in secrets, weapons, and leverage. We make alphas disappear. We topple packs that get too comfortable. And we don't answer to anyone's laws but our own." "You want that kind of power?" Lyra thought about Kael's face, about Seraphina's smile, about her mother's blood in the dirt. "Yes." "Good." Rhea stood. "Then here's how this works. You train until you can't remember what weakness feels like. You learn to read a wolf's intentions before they even know they have them. You become fluent in violence and negotiation and the 1,000 little ways to destroy someone without ever touching them. And if you survive the next 6 months without breaking, maybe you'll earn a real name. Maybe you'll earn a place in my organization. Maybe you'll even earn revenge. And if I don't survive, then you die and I find someone else." Rhea turned toward the door. "Welcome to the Syndicate, girl. Try not to disappoint me." The door slammed shut and Lyra was alone again. But this time, the silence felt different. Not like abandonment, like a promise. The training started that same night. They threw her into a ring with a male wolf twice her size and told her to last 5 minutes without submitting. She lasted 2 before he had her pinned, teeth at her throat, her own blood slicking the floor. "Again," Rhea said from the sidelines. They did it again, and again, and again. By the 20th round, Lyra stopped trying to overpower him, started watching the way his weight shifted before he lunged, the way his eyes telegraphed his next move. She stopped fighting like prey and started fighting like something with nothing left to lose. The next time he came at her, she went low, driving her shoulder into his knee. Bone cracked. He went down howling, and Lyra was on him before he could recover, teeth locked on his windpipe. "Enough!" Rhea called. Lyra didn't let go. Her wolf was screaming for blood, for payback against every strong thing that had ever made her feel small. "I said enough." Rhea's voice cut through the rage. "You've made your point. Now let him go before you do something you can't take back." Lyra released him and stepped away, shaking. The male wolf scrambled out of the ring, cradling his ruined knee. Rhea walked over and grabbed Lyra's chin, forcing eye contact. "You feel that? That fire in your chest? That's not rage. That's hunger. And if you feed it right, it'll make you unstoppable. But if you let it control you, you'll be just another rabid animal we have to put down. Understand?" Lyra nodded, still breathing hard. "Good." Rhea released her. "Now go clean up. Tomorrow we start on the real training." The real training was worse. They didn't just teach her to fight. They taught her to lie, to manipulate, to walk into a room full of hostile wolves and leave with everything she wanted without anyone realizing they'd been played. A woman named Kira handled most of it, sharp-eyed and vicious, with a talent for seeing through any deception. She'd set up scenarios where Lyra had to extract information from prisoners, negotiate deals with rival factions, or convince someone to betray their own pack. Every time Lyra failed, Kira made her run laps until she vomited. Every time she succeeded, Kira raised the stakes. "You're too honest," Kira said, after Lyra botched a negotiation for the 3rd time. "You still think telling the truth is a virtue. It's not." truth is a tool. Sometimes you use it, sometimes you bury it, but you never let it use you. They were in one of the compound's training rooms, bare concrete, a single table, 2 chairs. Kira had been playing the role of an alpha looking to buy weapons. Lyra was supposed to convince her to triple the order without seeming desperate. She'd failed because she couldn't hide the anger in her voice when Kira insulted the syndicate's reputation. You wear your emotions like flags, Kira continued. Any competent wolf can see exactly what you're feeling and use it against you. You want to survive in this world? You need to learn to lie with your entire body, your face, your scent, your heartbeat. All of it. How? Lyra's hands were clenched so tight her nails drew blood. By deciding that the person you used to be doesn't exist anymore. Kira leaned forward. That girl who loved an alpha? Dead. The girl who thought honor and loyalty mattered? Dead. You're building something new now, something that doesn't bleed when wolves like Kale Draven decide you're disposable. Lyra felt something shift in her chest. Not breaking. Hardening. Again, she said. They ran the scenario again. And this time when Kira insulted the syndicate, Lyra smiled. You're absolutely right, she said smoothly. We've had quality issues in the past. That's why I'm offering you a discount on the first order. Consider it an investment in a long-term partnership. Kira's eyes narrowed. What's the catch? No catch. Just good business. Lyra kept her voice level, her heartbeat steady. But I'll need a reference. Someone who can vouch for your pack's reliability. I'm sure you understand, recent events have made us cautious about new clients. It was a trap. If Kira gave a reference, Lyra would have leverage. If she refused, she'd look weak. Kira stared at her for a long moment. Then she laughed. Better, she said. Much better. 6 weeks into training, they sent Lyra on her first real mission. There was a pack in the eastern lowlands, small, isolated, led by an alpha named Carson Reed who'd been skimming from the syndicate's shipments. Rhea wanted him dealt with. Not killed. Not yet. Just reminded that stealing had consequences. You'll go in alone, Rhea said, handing Lyra a dossier. Reed likes young females. Uses them, breaks them, throws them away. He'll underestimate you. That's your advantage. Lyra looked at the file. Carson Reed was 43, built like a tank, with a history of violence that made her stomach turn. And she was supposed to walk into his territory and make him afraid. What if he doesn't listen? Then you make him, Rhea said simply. I don't care how. Just make sure he understands the message. The Reed Pack's compound was a converted warehouse surrounded by chain link and guard towers. Lyra approached alone, wearing clothes Kira had picked out, tight enough to be distracting, loose enough to hide the knife strapped to her thigh. The guards stopped her at the gate. One of them, a scarred male with dead eyes, looked her up and down like she was meat. State your business. I'm here to see Alpha Reed, Lyra said. Tell him the syndicate sent a gift. The guard's expression shifted to something uglier. A gift, huh? He does like those. They let her in. The warehouse interior was exactly what she expected. Concrete floors, exposed beams, the stink of unwashed bodies and desperation. Wolves lounged around in clusters, watching her pass with varying degrees of interest. Carson Reed sat on a throne made from welded scrap metal, drinking something dark from a bottle. When he saw Lyra, his grin was all teeth. Well, come closer, girl. Let me get a look at you. Lyra walked forward, keeping her steps measured. She could feel every eye in the room on her, weighing her worth. She stopped 10 feet from the throne. Alpha Reed, she said. I bring a message from Rhea Cross. Reed's smile didn't falter. Is that right? And what message would that be? That you've been taking things that don't belong to you. Lyra kept her voice steady. And that needs to stop. The room went silent. Reed set down his bottle slowly. You walked into my house, alone, to threaten me? Not a threat. A warning. Reed laughed. It was a terrible sound, full of genuine amusement. He stood, and Lyra realized he was even bigger up close. 6'5", maybe 260, all muscle and bad intentions. You know what I do to pretty little things who walk in here acting tough? Reed circled around her. I break them, slowly, and then I send pieces back to whatever idiot sent them. Lyra's heart was hammering, but she kept her breathing even. Kira's lessons echoing in her head. Don't show fear. Don't show anything. You could try, she said, but then Rhea would stop being polite. Reed stopped in front of her. And what exactly does impolite look like? Lyra met his eyes. She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who would have been terrified right now, the one who would have begged or cried or tried to run. That girl was dead. It looks like your supply line's burning, she said quietly. Your allies disappearing, your pack waking up one morning to find half their warriors gone and the other half too scared to stay. Rhea doesn't make examples often, but when she does, people remember. Reed's hand shot out, grabbing her throat. He lifted her off the ground with one arm, squeezing just hard enough to make breathing difficult. You think I'm scared of some bitch running a syndicate of cowards and cast-offs? Lyra didn't struggle, just stared at him, letting him see the absolute absence of fear in her eyes. I think you're scared enough to be angry, she whispered, and that's all Rhea needed to know. Reed's grip tightened. For a moment, Lyra thought he might actually kill her. Then something shifted in his expression. Uncertainty. He dropped her. Get out. Lyra landed on her feet, coughing. Not until you agree. Agree to what? To stop stealing from us. To pay back what you owe. And to remember that the syndicate doesn't forget. Reed's jaw worked. Every wolf in the room was watching, waiting to see if their alpha would back down to a lone female who'd walked in uninvited. Finally, Reed nodded once. Fine. You'll get your shipment. With interest. Good. Lyra turned to leave. Then she stopped. Oh, an Alpha Reed? Next time you put your hands on someone Rhea sent? She won't send a warning. She'll send a coffin. She walked out of that warehouse with her spine straight and her hands steady. It wasn't until she was half a mile into neutral territory that she started shaking. But she'd done it. She'd walked into a hostile Alpha's den, made him back down, and walked out alive. When she reported back to Rhea, the older woman just smiled. You're learning. Well, 3 months in, they gave her a new assignment, not a warning this time. An elimination. There was a wolf named Marcus Voss running a trafficking ring out of the border territories, stealing young wolves from weak packs and selling them to alphas who didn't ask questions. Rhea wanted him dead. This is different from Reed, Rhea said, handing Lyra a gun. Reed needed to be scared. Voss needs to stop existing. Can you do that? Lyra looked at the weapon. She'd trained with firearms, knew how to shoot, but shooting targets was different from shooting someone in the face. Yes, she said. You sure? Because once you cross this line, there's no going back. You won't be the victim anymore. You'll be the wolf other wolves tell horror stories about. Lyra thought about her mother dying in the dirt, about Kael's face when he said she wasn't enough, about every moment of her old life that had taught her mercy and compassion and all the other lies they fed to prey. I'm sure. Then make it clean. Rhea handed her the address. And try not to enjoy it too much. Marcus Voss lived in a cabin on the edge of contested territory. Lyra watched him for 2 days, learning his patterns. He was careful, always had guards, never left himself vulnerable, but everyone slept eventually. She went in through the window at 3 a.m. Voss was alone, snoring in a bed that stank of cheap whiskey and cheaper perfume. The guards were outside, lazy, not expecting trouble. Lyra stood over him with the gun in her hand, watching his chest rise and fall. 1 shot. That's all it would take. Quick, clean. But something in her hesitated. Not mercy. She was done with that. It was something else. A question. Did killing this man make her strong, or did it just make her another monster in a world full of them? Voss's eyes opened. He saw her, saw the gun, and his hand darted toward the nightstand. Lyra pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening in the small room. Voss jerked once and went still, a red bloom spreading across his chest. Lyra stood there, staring at what she'd done, waiting to feel something, guilt, horror, regret. But all she felt was empty. She left through the same window she'd entered, disappearing into the night before the guards even realized their boss was dead. When she got back to the compound, Rhea was waiting. It's done, Lyra said. How do you feel? Lyra thought about that. Nothing. I feel nothing. Rhea nodded, like she'd expected that answer. Good. Emotion makes you sloppy. You want to survive this life, you need to stay cold. But in her cell that night, alone in the dark, Lyra finally let herself feel it. Not regret for killing Voss, but grief for the girl she used to be. The one who believed in happy endings and true love and all the other fairy tales. That girl was gone, murdered as surely as Voss had been. And in her place was something sharper, something that could kill without flinching, something that Cale Draven wouldn't recognize if he saw it. Lyra closed her eyes and let that grief burn through her one last time. By morning, it was gone. The months blurred together after that. More missions, more blood, more lessons in how to turn weakness into weapons. Kira taught her to read financial records, to track money through shell companies and offshore accounts, to find the pressure points in any organization and squeeze until it crumbled. A man named Silas, ex-military, built like a wall, taught her advanced combat. Not just brawling, but strategy. How to disable an opponent in 3 moves. Where to cut to make someone bleed out fast. How to kill quietly. And Rhea taught her the most important lesson of all, how to be invisible. The best weapon you have isn't your teeth or your claws, Rhea said. It's the ability to make people underestimate you, to walk into a room and have everyone assume you're harmless until it's too late. They practiced it endlessly. Lyra would attend meetings with rival syndicates, playing the role of Rhea's assistant, quiet, decorative, beneath notice. And while the alphas postured and threatened, Lyra would be cataloging weaknesses, listening to the things they said when they thought no one important was paying attention. Information is power, Rhea reminded her, more than strength, more than violence. The wolf who knows everyone's secrets is the wolf who survives. By the time spring arrived, Lyra had been with the syndicate for 8 months. She'd killed 7 wolves, destroyed 3 trafficking rings, and helped broker deals worth millions. And somewhere along the way, she'd stopped flinching when Rhea called her useful. Then one night, Rhea summoned her to the command room, a converted bunker deep in the compound where they kept files on every major pack in the region. "Sit," Rhea said, gesturing to a chair. Lyra sat. She'd learned not to ask questions until Rhea was ready to answer. Rhea pulled out a file and slid it across the table. Inside were photographs, intelligence reports, financial records, and at the center of it all was a face Lyra hadn't seen in 8 months. Kyle Draven. Her chest tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "What is this?" "Your old pack is in trouble," Rhea said. Kale's alliance with the Blackwood pack is fracturing. Seraphina's father is demanding concessions Kyle can't afford. And there are rumors of a coup brewing inside his own territory. Lyra stared at the photograph. Kyle looked older, harder, like the weight of being alpha was crushing him from the inside. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I'm considering making a move on Vale territory." Rhea leaned back. Kale's vulnerable right now, distracted. And a destabilized pack that close to our operations is dangerous. I want to know if you can handle being in the same room as him without losing focus. "I can handle it." "You sure? Because from where I'm sitting, you just went rigid as a corpse the second you saw his face." Lyra forced herself to relax, forced her breathing to even out. "He's nothing to me." Rhea studied her with those sharp gray eyes. "We'll see. There's a summit in 2 weeks. Neutral territory. Every major pack will send representatives to discuss the territorial disputes. I'm going, and I'm bringing you." "As what?" "As my second." Rhea smiled. "Time to see if you're ready for the real game." The summit was held in an old hotel on the edge of neutral ground, a massive stone building that had seen better days but still carried the weight of old power. Packs from across the region sent their alphas and advisors, all of them circling each other like sharks. Lyra arrived with Rhea, dressed in black leather and silver, her hair pulled back in a severe knot. She looked nothing like the girl who'd worn a white dress to a ceremony that never happened. She looked like exactly what she was, something dangerous in a pretty package. The main hall was full of wolves in expensive suits and designer dresses, all pretending they weren't sizing each other up for weaknesses. Lyra recognized some faces from intelligence reports, alphas she'd studied, territories she'd helped destabilize. And then she saw him. Cale stood near the far wall, surrounded by his advisors. He wore a dark suit that made him look every inch the alpha, powerful, controlled, untouchable. Serafina was at his side, her hand possessive on his arm, her amber eyes scanning the room like she was calculating the value of every wolf present. Lyra's wolf snarled inside her chest, wanting blood, wanting revenge. But Lyra herself felt nothing, just cold appraisal. "Breathe," Rhea murmured beside her. "You're staring." Lyra looked away. "I'm fine." "Good. Because here's how this plays out. We mingle, we gather information, and when the time is right, we make Kyle an offer he can't refuse." "What kind of offer?" "The kind that puts him in our debt." Rhea's smile was sharp. And once an alpha owes the syndicate a favor, he never really stops owing. Before Lyra could respond, a wolf approached them. Male, mid-40s, with the kind of smooth confidence that marked him as someone used to getting his way. "Rhea Cross," he said, offering his hand. "I'd heard you might attend." Rhea shook it. "Alpha Donovan, pleasure." They exchanged pleasantries while Lyra stood silent, playing the role of decoration. But she was listening to every word, cataloging every tell. Donovan was nervous, trying to hide it, but nervous. "And who's this?" Donovan's attention shifted to Lyra. "My associate," Rhea said smoothly. "Celine Frost." The name was one they'd chosen carefully. Celine, goddess of the moon. Frost, cold and unforgiving. A name that meant something without revealing anything. Donovan extended his hand. Lyra took it, her grip firm but not aggressive. "Pleasure," she said. Her voice was different now, lower, controlled. Nothing like the girl who used to laugh at Kyle's terrible jokes. Donovan held her hand a beat too long. "Charming." "Tell me, Miss Frost, what brings the syndicate to a pack summit?" "We prefer to stay informed," Lyra said evenly. "Instability is bad for business." Donovan chuckled. "I suppose it is." As he walked away, Rhea leaned in. "See? You're already invisible." He looked right at you and saw exactly what we wanted him to see. Lyra nodded, but her attention had already shifted back across the room, to where Kale was staring directly at her. Their eyes met, and for one frozen second, Lyra saw recognition flicker across his face. Confusion, disbelief. Then Serafina said something, and his attention snapped back to her. "He knows," Lyra said quietly. "Impossible." Rhea's voice was calm. "You look nothing like the girl he knew. Different hair, different scent, different everything. If he recognized you, it's just his subconscious making connections it can't explain. And if he figures it out, then we deal with it." Rhea's hand settled on Lyra's shoulder. "But remember, you're not that girl anymore. Whatever he thinks he saw, it doesn't matter. You're Celine Frost now." And Celine Frost doesn't flinch. Right. But as the night wore on, Lyra could feel Kyle's attention circling back to her. Watching. Trying to solve a puzzle he didn't know existed. And when the speeches began, when each alpha stood to address the assembly, Kyle's voice cut through the room like a blade. He spoke about unity, about the dangers of fracturing territories, about the importance of honoring old alliances. Lyra listened and heard the lies beneath the words, heard the desperation of a man trying to hold together something that was already coming apart. When he finished, polite applause rippled through the room. Rhea stood next. She didn't talk about unity or honor. She talked about power, about the inevitability of change, about how the packs clinging to old ways would be swept aside by those willing to adapt. And when she finished, the silence was heavier than any applause. As they sat down, Kyle was staring again. But this time, when Lyra met his eyes, she didn't look away. She smiled. Cold. Sharp. The smile of a wolf who'd learned to enjoy the hunt. And in that moment, she saw the exact second Kyle realized he was looking at a predator. The private meeting started after midnight. Rhea had arranged a suite on the top floor, away from the main gatherings. One by one, alphas came to negotiate, to ask for favors, to offer deals, and Lyra sat beside Rhea, taking notes, observing, learning how power really worked. It wasn't about strength, it was about leverage, about knowing what someone needed and making them pay for it. When Alpha Donovan came, he wanted weapons. Rhea negotiated a price that would leave his pack broke within a year. When Alpha Chen arrived, she wanted information about her rivals. Rhea sold it to her, knowing it would trigger a war that would weaken both sides. And when the knock came at 2 a.m, Lyra already knew who it would be. Kyle Draven stood in the doorway, alone. No advisors, no Serafina, just him. Alpha Draven, Rhea said pleasantly. To what do we owe the honor? Kael's eyes went straight to Lyra. I need to speak with you, privately. Anything you say to me, you can say in front of Miss Frost. Kael's jaw tightened. Fine. I want to know what the Syndicate wants with my territory. Rhea smiled. What makes you think we want anything? Because you're here. Because Rhea Cross doesn't attend summits unless she's making a play. And because... He looked at Lyra again, and this time the confusion in his eyes was raw. Because I can't shake the feeling I know her. Lyra kept her expression neutral. We've never met, Alpha Draven. Maybe not. But... He stepped closer. You smell familiar. Interesting. Rhea's tone was amused. Are you in the habit of tracking strange women by scent? Kael ignored her. Who are you? Lyra stood, moving to face him directly. She was close enough to see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes. Close enough to smell the soap he still used, pine and leather. I'm Celine Frost, she said evenly, second in command of the Shadow Crescent Syndicate. And if you keep asking questions that don't concern you, we'll have a problem. Kael stared at her, and she could see him searching, trying to place her, trying to reconcile the impossible feeling that he'd lost something he was only now realizing had been precious. I know you, he said softly. No, Lyra replied, you don't. And she turned away, dismissing him like he was nothing. For a long moment, Kael just stood there. Then he addressed Rhea. What do you want? A partnership, Rhea said simply. Your pack is vulnerable. The Blackwood Alliance is collapsing. You have enemies circling. We can help with that. In exchange for what? Access. Information. Lyra's voice was flat. And your cooperation when we need it. Kael's hands clenched. I don't deal with criminals. You already have. Rhea's smile widened. That shipment of weapons you acquired last month? Syndicate. The intelligence you received about the Northern Pack movements? Also us. You've been in bed with us for months, Alpha Draven. We're just making it official. The color drained from Kael's face. That's impossible. Is it? We're very good at what we do. Rhea gestured to the door. Think about it. You have until the summit ends to decide. After that, our offer expires. Kael looked at Lyra one more time. She met his gaze and let him see nothing but ice. He left without another word. When the door closed, Rhea laughed. Well done, you didn't even flinch. Lyra sat back down, her hands perfectly steady. He's nothing to me, she said, and for the first time she actually believed it. The summit ended with handshakes and hollow promises, but Lyra could taste the blood underneath. Every alpha left believing they'd gained leverage, while Rhea had quietly positioned the Syndicate at the center of a web they didn't even know existed. Kael never gave his answer, just disappeared back to Vale territory with Serafina clinging to his arm like a parasite. Good, Rhea said as they drove away from the hotel. Let him stew. Fear makes people careless. But 3 days later, everything changed. Lyra was in the compound's intelligence room, reviewing financial reports from the Eastern Territories. When Silas burst through the door, his face was gray. We have a problem. Lyra looked up. What kind of problem? The kind where half our safe houses just got raided simultaneously. Silas threw a tablet on the table. Federal agents, local enforcers. Someone fed them our entire network. Rhea appeared in the doorway behind him, her expression carved from stone. How many did we lose? 17 operatives in custody. 4 dead. And they got the armory in Sector 9. The armory held enough weapons to start a small war. Losing it wasn't just a tactical blow. It was a message. Someone knew exactly where to strike to cripple them. Who knew the locations? Lyra's voice was steady, but her mind was racing. Inner circle only. Rhea's eyes were flat. You, me, Silas, Kira, and Marcus. Marcus, Rhea's logistics coordinator, the man who handled supply routes and safe house rotations, the man who'd been with the Syndicate for 6 years. Where is he? Lyra asked. Gone. Silas pulled up security footage, left 2 hours ago, told the gate guards he was running a supply check. Never came back. Rhea moved to the window, staring out at the compound. She was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Find him. Bring him back alive. I want to know who he sold us to before I personally tear his throat out. Bosam. They found Marcus 3 hours later in a motel 30 miles outside neutral territory. He'd been sloppy, left a trail a child could follow, almost like he wanted to be found. Lyra kicked in the door with Silas behind her, guns drawn. Marcus sat on the bed, hands raised, looking tired and resigned. I figured you'd come, he said. Where's the money? Lyra's gun didn't waver, already transferred, offshore accounts, untraceable. Who paid you? Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Does it matter? You're going to kill me either way. Silas moved forward, grabbing Marcus by the collar and slamming him against the wall. You've been with us for 6 years. Rhea trusted you, and that trust made it easy. Marcus didn't fight back, just hung there, bleeding from a split lip. You think the syndicate is some noble cause? We're parasites. We feed on the weak and call it justice. I got tired of pretending. Lyra felt something cold settle in her chest. This wasn't about money. This was about conviction. And that made it worse. You sold out 17 people. 4 are dead. They knew the risks. Marcus met her eyes. Just like you know yours. How long do you think you'll last before someone decides you're the liability? Before Rhea throws you to the wolves to save herself? Shut up. Silas drove a fist into Marcus's stomach. But Marcus kept talking, wheezing. You're fooling yourself, Celine. Or Lyra, or whatever you're calling yourself these days. Lyra's blood turned to ice. What did you just say? I know who you are. Marcus grinned through bloody teeth. The rejected mate. The dead girl. You think your little transformation makes you safe? You're still running from the same alpha who threw you away. How long have you known? Long enough. Marcus's smile widened. And I'm not the only one. Who else knows? Wouldn't you like to find out? Maybe it's Kira. Maybe it's Silas. Maybe it's Rhea herself, keeping you around as a weapon to use against Kael when the timing's right. You're lying. Am I? Marcus leaned forward despite Silas's grip. You ever wonder why Rhea picked you up off that riverbank? Out of all the broken wolves she could have saved, why you? Because she knew exactly who you were. Knew you'd be useful. Knew your rage would make you pliable. Lyra's hand tightened on the gun. Her mind was screaming denials, but underneath, a sick certainty was spreading. Rhea had known, from the very beginning. Silas looked at her. You want me to end this? Not yet. Lyra's voice was hollow. We bring him back. Let Rhea decide. Marcus laughed. Of course, run back to Mother. See what she tells you. See if she can lie to your face and make you believe it. Patats. They drove back to the compound in silence. Marcus was bound in the back of the truck, still smiling like he'd already won. Lyra stared out the window, watching the landscape blur past, trying to think through the implications. If Rhea had known who she was from the start, then everything, the training, the missions, the careful construction of Celine Frost, had been manipulation. A long game using Lyra's trauma as fuel. But why? What did Rhea gain from turning a broken mate into a weapon? Unless the weapon had always been pointed at Kael. When they arrived, Rhea was waiting in the courtyard. She took one look at Marcus and nodded to the guards. Take him to the holding cells. I'll deal with him later. We need to talk, Lyra said. Now. Rhea's eyes narrowed. In private. They went to Rhea's office, a converted bunker with maps on every wall and files stacked 3 feet high. The door closed with a heavy thud. What did he tell you? Rhea asked. That you've known who I am since the beginning. Rhea didn't deny it, just poured herself a drink and sat behind her desk. Yes, the confirmation landed like a punch. Why didn't you say anything? Would it have mattered? Rhea's tone was conversational. You were half dead, bleeding out, barely holding on to consciousness. If I'd said, hello, I know you're Kael Draven's rejected mate, and I plan to use that. Would you have come with me? Lyra's hands clenched. You manipulated me. I saved you. There's a difference. Rhea took a sip. You wanted power. I gave you the tools to take it. The fact that your history makes you useful against Kael is just good strategy. So that's all I am to you? A strategy? You're my second in command. Rhea's voice hardened. You've earned that through blood and competence, But yes, when the time comes to move against the Veil Pack, your connection to Kyle will be valuable. That doesn't erase everything else you've become. Lyra felt something fracture inside her. Another person using her. Another powerful figure who saw her as a means to an end, just like Kyle had. What's the play? Her voice was flat. What exactly are you planning to do with me and Kyle? Rhea set down her glass. The Blackwood Alliance is collapsing. Seraphina's father is pressuring Kyle to hand over territory he can't afford to lose. Within 6 months, there will be a conflict. And when that conflict comes, I want the Veil Pack destabilized enough that we can walk in and take control without firing a shot. And I'm supposed to be the one who destabilizes him. You're uniquely positioned. The woman he betrayed returned from the dead, now holding power he can't touch. That's psychological warfare at its finest. Lyra felt bile rise in her throat. You want me to destroy him? I want you to break him. There's a difference. Rhea leaned forward. Cale Draven threw you away. He let his mate orchestrate your murder. And then he built a life on top of your grave. Don't you want him to pay for that? Of course I do. The words came out raw. But I want it to be my choice, not yours. It is your choice. Rhea's expression didn't change. I'm giving you the opportunity. What you do with it is up to you. Liar. Lyra's voice shook. You've been steering me toward this from day one. Every mission, every lesson, every moment was designed to turn me into something you could aim at him. Yes. And you let me. Because deep down, you wanted the same thing. Rhea stood. You can be angry about the manipulation. You can hate me for using you. But don't pretend you didn't know on some level. You're too smart for that. The truth of it hit like a hammer. Lyra had known. Maybe not consciously, but she'd felt the direction Rhea was pushing. And she'd gone along with it because the alternative, admitting she'd been used twice, was unbearable. Get out, Rhea said. Think about what you want. And when you're ready to stop pretending you're a victim, come back and we'll finish this conversation. Lyra left the office feeling like her skin was on fire. She found Kira in the training room working through forms with mechanical precision. When Kira saw Lyra's face, she stopped. Marcus talked. I heard. Kira wiped sweat from her forehead. What did he say? That Rhea's been using me, that everything was a setup from the beginning. Kira was quiet for a moment, then she sighed. You want the truth or the version that makes you feel better? The truth. Rhea knew who you were. Probably figured it out within an hour of pulling you off that beach. Kira sat on the edge of the ring. But here's the thing, she would have trained you either way. Because you had potential. The Kael connection just made you more valuable. So everyone knew but me. Not everyone. I didn't know until about 4 months in. Caught Rhea looking at old intelligence files on the Veil Pack with your picture circled. Kira met her eyes. I confronted her. She admitted it. Said she was waiting for the right time to tell you. And you didn't think I deserved to know? Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was trying to sabotage you? Kira's tone was matter of fact. Rhea's not wrong about one thing. Your rage made you better, faster, sharper. If you'd known you were being aimed at Kael from the start, you might have lost focus. Lyra wanted to argue. But the worst part was that Kira was right. Her anger at Kael had fueled every brutal hour of training, every mission, every kill. If she'd known it was orchestrated, she might have rejected it out of pride. What do I do now? That's up to you, Kira stood. But if you're asking my opinion? Use it. Rhea handed you a loaded gun. Doesn't matter why. What matters is what you aim it at. Barbet. Lyra spent the next 2 days in isolation, trying to untangle the mess in her head. Marcus was executed. Rhea slit his throat personally and left the body as a warning to anyone else considering betrayal. But his words lingered like poison. You're still running from the same alpha who threw you away. Was that true? Had she really changed, or had she just traded one form of dependence for another? Kael had controlled her through love. Rhea controlled her through purpose. Either way, someone else held the strings. On the 3rd day, Silas found her on the roof of the compound, staring at the horizon. Rhea wants to see you. Tell her I'm busy. She said it wasn't a request. Silas's voice was apologetic. And she's not alone. Who's with her? Silas hesitated. Kael Draven. The world tilted. What? He showed up an hour ago. Alone. Asking to negotiate with Celine Frost. Ria's keeping him in the conference room. Lyra's heart was hammering. Why would he come here? No idea. But Ria thinks you should hear what he has to say. Silas met her eyes. She also said to remind you that you're in control. Whatever happens in that room, it's your call. Right? Control. The thing Lyra had been chasing for months. The thing she still wasn't sure she actually had. She followed Silas down to the conference room. Outside the door, she paused, steadying her breathing. Then she walked in. Kale sat at the table, flanked by two of Ria's guards. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, jaw tight with stress. When he saw Lyra, something shifted in his expression. Recognition. "It's you," he said quietly. "I knew it." Ria sat across from him, perfectly composed. "Alpha Draven believes he's figured something out. I thought you should hear it directly." Lyra remained standing, arms crossed. "What are you doing here, Kyle? Looking for answers." Kale stood slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "I've been going insane for the past week. Your scent, your eyes, the way you move, it's impossible, but I can't shake it. So I did some digging. Found out Ria was in the neutral zone the night of the fire. The same night Lyra Vale supposedly died. Congratulations." Lyra's voice was ice. "You've connected dots. Want a medal? I want the truth." Kale took a step forward, and the guards tensed. "Are you her? Are you Lyra?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Lyra could deny it, could laugh in his face and send him away still questioning his sanity. That's what Ria would want. Keep him off balance. Keep him guessing. But looking at him now, seeing the desperation and guilt carved into every line of his face, Lyra realized she didn't want to hide anymore. She wanted him to know exactly what he'd lost. "Yes," she said. "I'm Lyra Vale. Or I was. Before you and your future Luna tried to burn me alive." Kael went white. "That's not... I didn't know..." "Didn't know?" Lyra's laugh was sharp. "You rejected me in front of the entire pack. You let Seraphina take my place, and when I disappeared, you didn't even look for me." "I did look." Kael's voice cracked. "When I found out what Seraphina had done, when I realized the fire wasn't an accident, I searched for weeks. But they found your mother's body. They said you drowned. I thought, you thought I was dead, so you moved on." Lyra stepped closer. "Tell me, Kael, how long did it take? A week? A month? How long before you stopped feeling guilty and just accepted your new Luna?" Kael's hands clenched. "I never accepted her. The alliance with the Blackwood Pack was falling apart before the ceremony even ended. Seraphina's father used the bond to seize control of half my territory. I've spent the last year trying to undo the damage. And that's supposed to make me feel sorry for you?" "No." Kael's voice dropped. "Nothing I say will fix what I did. I destroyed you because I was a coward. Because I thought pack politics mattered more than..." "Then what?" Lyra's voice was dangerous. "More than love? More than me?" "Yes." The admission hung between them like a corpse. Kael took another step forward. "I thought I was protecting the pack. Thought a strong alliance would keep us safe. But all I did was invite a viper into my home and lose the only person who ever..." "Stop." Lyra held up a hand. "I don't want your regrets. I don't want your apologies. That version of me who needed to hear those words, she's dead. You killed her." "I know." Kael's eyes were shining. "But you're still here. You survived. And you became a monster?" Lyra smiled coldly. "Is that what you were going to say?" "Powerful," Kael finished. "You became everything I was too blind to see you could be." Ria cleared her throat. "Touching as this is, Alpha Draven, you still haven't explained why you're here. Surely you didn't come just to beg forgiveness?" Kael dragged his attention away from Lyra. "I came to offer an alliance. The Blackwood Pack is preparing to move against me. Seraphina's been consolidating support among my own wolves. Within a month there will be a coup, and I don't have the resources to stop it alone. So you want the Syndicate's help?" Ria sounded amused. "And what exactly would we get in exchange?" "Whatever you want. Territory, access, information." Kael's jaw was tight. "Name your price. My second in command." Ria's smile was sharp. "I want Lyra to be the one who decides whether we help you or let you burn." Kael looked at Lyra, and she saw the exact moment he understood the trap. If he begged for her help, He'd be acknowledging her power, admitting she'd surpassed him. But if he walked away, he'd lose everything. "Please," he said quietly, "not for me. For the pack. For the wolves who had nothing to do with what happened to you." Lyra felt something twist in her chest. The pack. The same pack that had watched her humiliation in silence, that had mourned her death for maybe a week before moving on. "Give me one reason I should care what happens to them." "Because you're better than me." Kael's voice was raw. "Because you always were. And because I know that underneath everything you've become, there's still a part of you that believes in protecting the innocent." "You don't know anything about what's underneath." Lyra's voice shook. "You lost that right." "I know." Kael's shoulders sagged. "But I'm asking anyway, not as an alpha, not as the man who destroyed you, just as someone who's out of options and desperate enough to beg." The silence that followed was suffocating. Lyra looked at Rhea, who was watching with calculated interest. This was the moment, the culmination of months of training and manipulation. Rhea had positioned her perfectly, holding all the power while Kael groveled. But something felt wrong. This wasn't victory. This was just another person controlling the outcome. "I'll think about it," Lyra said finally. "Give me 2 days?" Kael nodded. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You might not like my answer." After Kael left, Rhea cornered Lyra in the hallway. That was well played, keeping him on the hook, making him sweat. "That's not what I was doing." "Wasn't it?" Rhea tilted her head. "You had him broken in front of you, begging, and you held back." "Why?" "Because I'm not sure what the right move is." "The right move is the one that gives us control of Vale territory without a fight." Rhea's voice hardened. "Kael's offering himself on a platter. We take his alliance, help him with the Blackwood problem, and then we own him. Own his pack. Everything. And if I don't want that, then you're letting emotion cloud your judgment." Rhea stepped closer. "He hurt you. He destroyed you. This is your chance to return the favor. Why are you hesitating?" "Because maybe I don't want to be the kind of person who kicks someone when they're down just because I can." Lyra met her eyes. "You taught me to be strong, to be ruthless. But you never taught me to be cruel for cruelty's sake. Cruelty is just another tool." Rhea's expression was unreadable. "And sentiment is a weakness. Is it? Or is it the thing that separates us from monsters like Marcus, like Seraphina?" Rhea was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed. "You're going to help him, aren't you?" "I don't know yet." "Yes, you do. I can see it in your eyes." Rhea turned away. "Fine. Help him. But when it backfires, when he betrays you again because that's what weak alphas do, don't come crying to me." She walked away, leaving Lyra alone in the corridor. Lyra spent the next day gathering information. She had Silas pull files on the Blackwood pack, on Seraphina's movements, on the wolves in Kael's pack who'd aligned with the coup. The picture that emerged was grim. Seraphina had spent the past year systematically dismantling Kael's authority, turning his advisors against him, spreading rumors about his weakness, positioning herself as the true power behind the throne. And in 2 weeks, during the Blood Moon Summit, she was planning to make her move. A formal challenge. If Kael lost, she'd take the pack. If he won but was too weakened, the Blackwood pack would invade anyway. It was a perfect trap. Kira found her in the records room at midnight, surrounded by papers. "You're really going to do this, aren't you? Save the man who threw you away." "Maybe." "Why?" Lyra looked up. "Because Seraphina played both of us. She manipulated Kael into rejecting me, then tried to have me killed to cover her tracks. And she's been controlling him ever since. If I let him fall, she wins, and I'm not okay with that. So this is about revenge against her, not helping him." "Does it matter?" Kira shrugged. "Not really. As long as you're clear on your motivation." "I am." Lyra stood. "I'm going to burn Seraphina's world down. And if Kael benefits from that, fine. But he doesn't get forgiveness. He doesn't get me back. He just gets to survive." "Fair enough." Kira headed for the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think you're making the right call. Rhea's wrong about sentiment being weakness. It's what makes you human. Lose that, and you're just another predator." Back. Lyra sent word to Kael the next morning. She'd help. but on her terms. They met in neutral territory, an abandoned warehouse on the border. Kale arrived alone, as instructed. "Thank you," he said as soon as he saw her. "Don't." Lyra's voice was flat. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because Serafina needs to pay for what she did to both of us." "Understood. Here's how this works." Lyra handed him a folder. "This is every piece of dirt the Syndicate has on the Blackwood Pack. Financial crimes, treaty violations, evidence that Serafina's father has been running illegal operations through your territory. You take this to the summit, you expose them publicly, and you sever the alliance." Kale flipped through the documents, his expression darkening. "This will destroy them." "Yes. It'll also make me a target. The Blackwood Pack won't take this lying down." "I know. That's why you're going to accept the Syndicate's protection, publicly. You announce that you've allied with us, and suddenly attacking you means going to war with Rhea Cross. Most packs won't risk that." Kale looked up. "And what does the Syndicate get? A foothold in your territory, access to your trade routes, and a very large consulting fee." Lyra's smile was cold. "You wanted our help. This is the price." Kale was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Done. One more thing." Lyra stepped closer. "When this is over, when Serafina's dealt with and your pack is stable, you and I are done. No more meetings, no more negotiations. You go your way and I go mine." Kale's face crumpled. "Lyra, I mean it. Whatever you think you see when you look at me, it's not her. Lyra Vale died in that river. I'm someone else now. And I don't have room in my life for ghosts." "I understand." "Good." She turned to leave. "For what it's worth," Kyle said quietly, "I'm proud of you, of what you've become. Even if I hate that it took losing you to see how extraordinary you always were." Lyra didn't turn around. "Save it for someone who cares." She walked out of the warehouse and didn't look back. The Blood Moon Summit was 2 weeks away. Lyra spent the time preparing, coordinating with Rhea, drilling the plan with Silas and Kira, making sure every angle was covered. But 3 days before the summit, everything fell apart. Lyra was in her quarters when the alarm started blaring. She grabbed her weapon and ran to the command center where chaos had erupted. "What's happening?" she shouted over the noise. Rhea's face was stone. "We're under attack. Blackwood forces. At least 50 wolves, heavily armed. How did they know where to find us?" Someone talked. Rhea's eyes were murderous. "And I'm going to find out who." The compound shook as explosions rocked the outer walls. Lyra could hear gunfire, screaming, the sounds of wolves tearing into each other. "We need to evacuate," Silas said. "Get to the tunnels before—" The door exploded inward. Serafina Blackwood stood in the smoking entrance, flanked by a dozen fighters. She looked immaculate despite the carnage, not a hair out of place, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Hello, Lyra. Or should I say Celine?" Serafina's eyes glittered. "Funny how names change, but the stench of weakness stays the same." Lyra raised her gun. "How did you find us?" "Oh, that was easy." Serafina stepped over rubble. "Kyle told me everything. Where you were hiding, what you were planning. Poor desperate Kyle, so eager to save his pack that he sold you out without a second thought." The words hit like bullets. "You're lying." "Am I?" Serafina pulled out a phone and tossed it to Lyra. "Check the messages. See for yourself." Lyra caught the phone, opened it, and felt her world shatter. The messages were from Kyle, detailing the Syndicate's location, Lyra's identity, the plan to expose the Blackwood Pack at the summit. Everything. He'd given Serafina everything. Rhea's voice was ice. "I told you sentiment was a weakness." Lyra couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She'd trusted him, not with her heart, that was long dead, but with tactical information, with the Syndicate's safety, and he'd used it to bargain for his own survival. Again. Why? The word came out broken. "Because I own him." Serafina's smile widened. "I've owned him since the night I convinced him you weren't good enough. And when he came crawling to me, terrified about the evidence you'd given him, it was so easy to flip him. I promised to let his pack survive if he delivered you, and he agreed without hesitation." Another explosion shook the compound. Serafina gestured to her fighters. "Take them, all of them. I want Rhea and Lyra alive. The rest can burn." Lyra's vision went red. She'd spent a year remaking herself. becoming something strong, something untouchable. And Kael had destroyed it all with the same cowardice that had ruined her the first time. There would be no more mercy, no more hesitation, no more clinging to the idea that somewhere beneath the monster she'd become, there was still something worth saving. That girl was dead. And this time, Lyra was going to make damn sure she stayed buried. The phone slipped from Lyra's fingers and hit the concrete with a crack that sounded like bone breaking. Around her, the compound was collapsing into chaos. Gunfire ripping through walls, wolves screaming, the acrid stench of explosives mixing with blood. But all of it felt distant compared to the roaring in her ears. Kael had sold her out, again, not out of malice this time, not even out of weakness, out of pure survival instinct, the same instinct that had made him choose Serafina over her a year ago. When forced to pick between his pack and anything else, Kael would always choose his pack, always sacrifice whoever stood in the way. And Lyra had been stupid enough to forget that. Serafina's fighters moved forward, weapons raised. Rhea was already shifting, her wolf form erupting in a shower of torn clothing and rage. Silas grabbed Lyra's arm, yanking her toward the emergency exit. "Move!" he shouted. But Lyra didn't move. Couldn't move. Because something fundamental had just broken inside her chest. Not her heart, that had shattered a year ago, but the last fragile belief that she could outrun what she was. A girl who kept trusting the wrong people. A fool who thought changing her name and learning to kill would somehow make her less disposable. "Lyra!" Kira's voice cut through the fog. "If you don't move right now, we all die here." The words snapped something into place. Lyra looked at Serafina, at the smug satisfaction carved into that perfect face, and felt clarity settle over her like ice water. There would be no running this time. No surviving to fight another day. Because the lesson she'd refused to learn kept repeating until she finally understood it. You didn't escape people like Serafina and Kael by becoming stronger or smarter or more ruthless. You escaped them by burning everything they loved until there was nothing left but ash. "Get everyone to the tunnels," Lyra said quietly. "What?" Silas looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "We're not leaving you. That's an order." Lyra's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Get Rhea and the others out. I'll buy you time. You can't hold them alone." Kira's eyes were wild. "There's 50 of them and one of you. Then I better make it count." Lyra pulled the gun from her holster and checked the magazine. 12 rounds. Not nearly enough. But sometimes the point wasn't winning. Sometimes it was making the other side pay so dearly for victory that they'd think twice before coming after your people again. Rhea shifted back to human form, blood streaming from a gash across her ribs. "Don't be a fool. We fight together or we die together." "No." Lyra met her eyes. "You taught me that sentiment was weakness, that survival meant making the hard calls. So here's mine. You get our people out alive. I make sure Serafina regrets ever learning my name." For a moment, Rhea just stared at her. Then something shifted in her expression. Not quite respect, but close. She nodded once. "Make it hurt." "Oh, I plan to." Silas grabbed supplies from the weapons cache. Extra magazines, a combat knife, 2 grenades that probably shouldn't have been in a residential compound, but nobody was questioning protocol right now. He pressed them into Lyra's hands. "Don't die," he said roughly. "We still need you." Lyra smiled. It felt strange on her face. "No, you don't. That's the whole point." Then she turned and walked toward the flames. The main corridor was a war zone. Bodies littered the floor, some wearing syndicate colors, others in Blackwood black. Lyra moved through the carnage like a ghost, her wolf howling inside her ribs, but her human mind staying ice-cold and tactical. Serafina had split her forces. Smart. Half were pushing toward the command center where Rhea had been. The other half were securing escape routes, making sure nobody slipped away, which meant the center of the compound was relatively clear, and the armory, the one Marcus had sold out, was in the center. If she could reach it before they realized what she was doing, she could turn this slaughter into something approaching even odds. She killed the first guard with the knife, quick and silent. Blade through the throat before he could shout. The second one got off a shot that grazed her shoulder, tearing through muscle and making her left arm go numb. She put 2 rounds in his chest and kept moving. The armory door was locked. Lyra shot out the mechanism and kicked it open. Inside was a beautiful sight. Racks of automatic weapons, body armor, enough explosives to level a city block. The Syndicate had been preparing for war. They just hadn't expected it to come crashing through their front door. Lyra grabbed an assault rifle and as much ammunition as she could carry, strapped on body armor that was too big, but better than nothing, and then she started setting charges. If she was going to make a stand, she was damn well going to make sure the compound couldn't be used by Serafina after. Every weapon, every file, every piece of intelligence that could hurt the people she'd spent a year bleeding beside, it all needed to burn. She had the charges placed and was arming the timer when she heard footsteps behind her. Clever. Serafina stood in the doorway, flanked by 6 fighters. I should have known you'd go for the scorched earth option. It's so predictably desperate. Lyra turned, rifle raised. You talk too much. So I've been told. Serafina stepped into the armory, utterly unconcerned about the weapon pointed at her face. But here's the thing about desperate moves. They only work if you're willing to die for them. And I don't think you are. You've spent a year learning to survive. You're not going to throw that away for pride. Watch me. Lyra's finger tightened on the trigger. If you shoot me, my fighters kill you. If you detonate those charges, we all die together. Serafina smiled. Either way, Kael gets exactly what he wanted. Both of us dead, and his precious pack safe from the consequences of his choices. The words landed like a punch, because Serafina was right. If Lyra died here, Kael would mourn for maybe a week. Then he'd move on. Again. He'd rebuild his pack and tell himself he'd done what was necessary. And Serafina's death wouldn't change that, unless Lyra made it change. You're right, Lyra said slowly. Dying here would be stupid. I'm glad you're finally seeing reason. Serafina gestured to her fighters. Take her weapons. We'll bring her back to... But Lyra was already moving, not toward Serafina, toward the detonator on the explosives. Her hand slammed down on the button, and the timer jumped from 20 minutes to 30 seconds. Serafina's eyes went wide. What did you just do? Ensured mutual destruction. Lyra raised the rifle again. You've got 30 seconds to get your people out of the blast radius, or we can all die together. Your choice. You're insane. No, I'm just done letting you win. For one frozen heartbeat, Serafina stared at her. Then she screamed at her fighters to run and bolted from the armory. Lyra waited until they were gone, counted to 5, then sprinted for the secondary exit, a ventilation shaft that led to the perimeter fence. She hit the tunnel at a dead run, her injured shoulder screaming, legs burning. The explosion came when she was 20 feet from the exit. The shockwave threw her forward, smashing her into the tunnel wall hard enough to crack ribs. Fire roared behind her, consuming oxygen, turning the corridor into an oven. Lyra crawled, dragged herself through metal and smoke and heat that blistered her skin. Her vision was graying out, her lungs were collapsing. But she kept moving. Because dying in a tunnel meant Serafina got to write the ending, and Lyra was done letting other people control her story. She burst out of the exit shaft and into open air, rolled down a hillside and landed in a creek that was probably contaminated, but she didn't care. The cold water shocked her system back to something approaching consciousness. Behind her, the compound was an inferno, flames reaching toward the night sky. Secondary explosions as ammunition cooked off, the entire structure collapsing in on itself like a dying star. And Lyra lay in the creek, coughing up smoke and blood, watching everything she'd built for the past year turn to ash. But she was alive. And somewhere in that burning wreckage, Serafina had lost half her forces and every piece of evidence she'd come to seize. It wasn't victory, but it was survival. And sometimes that was enough. Lyra found the others 3 miles north, holed up in one of the Syndicate's emergency shelters. Rhea was having her ribs wrapped by Kira. Silas was coordinating with the few operatives who'd made it out. 23 people total out of a compound that had housed over 60. The math was brutal, but they'd survived. When Lyra stumbled into the shelter, covered in soot and bleeding from a dozen wounds, Rhea actually smiled. "You magnificent bastard. You actually blew it all up." Seemed like the thing to do. Lyra collapsed against the wall. Did everyone make it out? Everyone who was getting out. Rhea's expression hardened. We lost 37. Another 10 are missing, probably captured. The numbers hit like bullets. 37 dead. Because Kael had sold them out. Because Lyra had been stupid enough to trust him. "This is on me," she said quietly. "I should have seen it coming. We all should have." Ria's voice was uncharacteristically gentle. Kael's weakness isn't new. We just chose to believe he'd changed. He didn't change. Lyra's laugh was bitter. He just found a new person to sacrifice. "So what now?" Kira handed her a water bottle. "We're down to skeleton crew. No compound. No armory. The Blackwood Pack knows we're vulnerable. Now we make them pay." Lyra took a long drink, tasting copper and ash. Serafina thinks she's won. Thinks destroying our base means we're finished. But the Syndicate was never about buildings and weapons. It was about information, about fear, about making sure the wolves who crossed us never forgot it. She's right. Ria pulled out a tablet that had somehow survived the chaos. We still have our off-site servers, every piece of intelligence we've gathered over the past 5 years, every dirty secret on every major pack, including the Blackwood family. And Kael, Silas added quietly, we have enough on him to destroy his pack's reputation permanently. Lyra thought about that. Thought about burning Kael's world down the way he'd burned hers. It would be easy, justified even. One data leak and the Veil Pack would collapse under the weight of scandal. But that wasn't enough anymore. Destruction was easy. Any wolf with a match could burn things down. What separated the predators from the prey was knowing when to strike and when to wait. "No," Lyra said. "We don't touch Kael yet." Everyone stared at her. "Why the hell not?" Kira's voice was sharp. "He sold us out, got our people killed, because Serafina's counting on us going after him." Lyra's mind was racing now, pieces clicking into place. She knows we have dirt on Kael, probably expects us to leak it in revenge. And when we do, she'll use the chaos to seize control of the Veil Pack unopposed. "So we let him get away with it?" Silas looked disgusted. "No. We use him." Lyra stood, ignoring the way her ribs screamed. "The Blood Moon Summit is in 4 days. Every major pack will be there, including the Blackwoods. Serafina thinks she's won, destroyed our compound, scattered our forces. She'll be feeling confident, vulnerable. And we hit her when her guard is down." Ria's smile was vicious. "I like it. But we don't have the numbers for a direct assault." "We don't need numbers." Lyra pulled up maps on the tablet. "We need precision. We identify her power base, the wolves keeping her in control. We feed them information that makes them question her leadership. And then, when she's weakened, we strike in a way she'll never see coming. Through Kael." Kira's eyes lit up with understanding. "We make it look like he's the one who betrayed her." Exactly. Lyra felt something cold and satisfied settle in her chest. Kael wants to save his pack by playing both sides. Fine. We'll make sure both sides turn on him at once. Serafina will think he double-crossed her. Her father will pull the Blackwood Alliance, and Kael will be left standing in the ruins of everything he sacrificed us to protect. It's beautiful. Ria stood, wincing. Ruthless, effective, everything I trained you to be. There's one problem. Silas pulled up security footage from the compound attack. Serafina captured 10 of our people. If we move against her, she'll kill them. The room went quiet. Because that was the equation that separated the living from the dead in this world. How much were you willing to sacrifice to win? What price was too high? Lyra thought about the wolves who'd trained beside her, who'd bled with her, who were probably being tortured right now for information they didn't have. "We get them back first," she said. "Before the summit. Before any of this goes down." "That's suicide." Kira's voice was flat. "Serafina's expecting a rescue attempt. She'll have them locked down tight. Then we don't rescue them. We trade." Lyra looked at Ria. "What's the one thing Serafina wants more than revenge?" "Power." Ria's eyes narrowed. "Control of the Syndicate's network, which we can't give her, but we can make her think we're willing to negotiate." Lyra started pacing, adrenaline overriding pain. "We send a message. Say we're willing to trade, our intelligence network for our people. Set up a meet at neutral ground. She'll never believe we'd give up that much." Silas shook his head. "She will if we make it look desperate enough." Lyra's smile was sharp. "We've been hit hard, lost our compound. We're scattered and vulnerable. From her perspective, trading intelligence for warm bodies makes sense. It's what a broken organization would do." "And when she shows up for the trade?" Kira asked. We don't give her intelligence, we give her a lesson in what happens when you underestimate the syndicate. Dick. They spent the next 48 hours planning. Rhea coordinated with their few remaining assets. Wolves scattered across 3 territories, all waiting for orders. Silas prepped equipment. Kira handled the psychological profile on Serafina, identifying weaknesses they could exploit. And Lyra wrote the message that would bait the trap. It was a masterpiece of calculated desperation. Enough defiance to seem real. Enough weakness to make Serafina think she'd won. She sent it through encrypted channels, knowing Serafina's people would intercept it within hours. The reply came faster than expected. Serafina agreed to the trade. 2 days before the summit, neutral territory. She'd bring the prisoners. They'd bring the intelligence network access codes. It was almost too easy, which meant Serafina was planning her own double cross. Good. Lyra was counting on it. Ooked. The meeting site was an abandoned factory on the border between Vale and Blackwood territories. Concrete and rust. Broken windows that let in the gray morning light. The kind of place where bad things happened and nobody asked questions. Lyra arrived with Rhea and 5 others, all the muscle they could spare. They set up in the center of the factory floor, a laptop open on a rusted table. The access codes were real, or at least they looked real. What Serafina wouldn't know until it was too late was that activating them would trigger a virus that would brick every device on her network. But that was the backup plan. The real play was much simpler. Serafina arrived exactly on time, flanked by 20 fighters and the 10 syndicate prisoners. They looked rough, bruised, beaten, but alive. Lyra's jaw tightened, seeing them chained like animals. Serafina smiled across the factory floor. I'll admit, I'm surprised you came. I expected you to cut your losses and run. We take care of our own, Lyra said evenly. Unlike some people. Spare me the righteousness. Serafina gestured to her fighters. You brought the codes? Right here. Lyra turned the laptop so Serafina could see the screen. Full access to every server, every file, every asset. You'll have everything. Serafina's eyes gleamed. And in exchange, you get 10 broken wolves who'll probably never fight again. Seems like a bad trade. That's my problem. Lyra's voice was cold. Are we doing this or not? Serafina nodded to one of her fighters. Bring them forward. But as the prisoners were unchained and pushed toward the center of the factory, Lyra saw it. The slight shift in Serafina's posture, the way her hand drifted toward the weapon at her belt. She was going to kill them all. Take the intelligence and eliminate the witnesses. Lyra had expected this, planned for it. But seeing it unfold still sent ice through her veins. The prisoners reached the midpoint between the two groups. Lyra's people moved to help them. And that's when Serafina gave the order. Take them. Gunfire erupted. Lyra's people dove for cover as Serafina's fighters opened up with automatic weapons. The prisoners screamed, caught in the crossfire. Concrete exploded into dust and shrapnel. But Lyra was already moving, not toward cover, toward Serafina. She'd learned a year ago that sometimes the only way to win was to do the thing nobody expected, the thing that made no tactical sense but struck at the heart of the enemy's arrogance. Lyra hit Serafina at a dead run, tackling her to the ground. They went down in a tangle of limbs and fury. Serafina's fighters couldn't shoot without risking their alpha. And in that moment of hesitation, Rhea's people struck. The explosives they'd planted around the factory detonated. Not the whole building, just strategic points that collapsed the eastern wall and cut off half of Serafina's forces from the rest. Chaos erupted, wolves shifting, gunfire, hand-to-hand combat in the choking dust. And in the center of it all, Lyra and Serafina fought like animals. Serafina was stronger, better trained. She got Lyra on her back and wrapped her hands around her throat, squeezing. You should have stayed dead, she hissed. Would have been easier. Lyra couldn't breathe. Black spots danced across her vision. But her hand found the knife at her belt. She drove it into Serafina's side, feeling it punch through muscle and scrape bone. Serafina screamed and rolled away. Lyra surged to her feet, gasping, the world spinning. Around them, the battle was turning. Rhea had rallied the prisoners, and they were fighting alongside the syndicate forces despite their injuries. Serafina's fighters were trapped between two fronts and collapsing defenses. But Serafina herself was still dangerous. She shifted, bones cracking, reforming, fur erupting across her skin. Her wolf form was massive, golden and perfect and absolutely lethal. Lyra shifted too, Her transformation was rougher, less practiced. But when it was done, she stood on 4 legs and bared teeth that had tasted blood before. They circled each other in the wreckage. 2 wolves who'd hated each other from the moment their paths crossed. 2 women who'd both been used by the same man and responded in completely different ways. Seraphina had chosen to become the predator, to take what she wanted through manipulation and force. Lyra had chosen to become something else. Something that protected its own. Something that would burn itself to ash if it meant the people she cared about survived. There was no honor in the fight that followed, no dignity, just tooth and claw and blood-soaked concrete. Seraphina was faster, but Lyra was meaner, had less to lose. Fought like she'd learned in the Syndicate, not to win cleanly, but to make the other side hurt. She got her teeth into Seraphina's throat, bit down hard enough to taste arterial blood. Seraphina thrashed, trying to throw her off, but Lyra held on with everything she had. This is for my mother, she thought. For every wolf you destroyed, for every life you ruined because you were too selfish to care about anything but power. But just as Seraphina's struggles were weakening, just as Lyra was about to finish it, a gunshot cracked through the factory. Pain exploded in Lyra's side. She lost her grip and staggered back, shifting involuntarily. Blood poured from a wound just below her ribs. Not fatal, but bad enough. She looked up to see who'd shot her, and her world stopped. Kyle Draven stood in the eastern entrance, gun raised, face twisted with horror and regret. He'd come, probably to stop the bloodshed, probably to try one more time to fix the mess he'd created. And in doing so, he'd just saved Seraphina's life and doomed them all.
Lyra, he breathed. I didn't mean, I was trying to... Words failed him, as they always did when it mattered. Seraphina shifted back to human form, gasping and bleeding, but alive. She looked at Kyle, looked at Lyra, and smiled through the blood coating her teeth. Well, she said, isn't this perfect? Around them, the fighting had stopped, both sides frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. Lyra pressed a hand to her bleeding side and met Kyle's eyes. He looked shattered, desperate, like a man watching his last chance at redemption slip through his fingers. You just don't learn, do you? Lyra's voice was hoarse. Every time. Every single time I start to think maybe you deserve a chance, you prove me wrong. I was trying to stop this. Kale's gun lowered. I came to tell you the truth, that Seraphina forced me to give her your location. She threatened to slaughter every Omega and pup in my pack if I didn't. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. Lyra laughed, and it came out broken. You just keep choosing wrong. Seraphina stood, one hand pressed to the wound in her side. How touching. The great Alpha Draven, trying to save everyone and destroying everything instead. Her eyes were vicious. Kill them. All of them. Her fighters raised their weapons, and Lyra realized this was it. The end. She'd fought and clawed and rebuilt herself from ashes, and it still wasn't enough. Because in the end, she was still the girl who'd trusted Kale Draven. Still the fool who thought she could win. But then Rhea's voice cut through the chaos. I don't think so. Lyra turned to see Rhea standing on top of the rubble, holding a detonator. Around the factory perimeter, red laser sights appeared, dozens of them, all trained on Seraphina's fighters. You didn't think we'd come to a hostage trade without backup, did you? Rhea's smile was savage. Every sniper in a 3-mile radius is under Syndicate contract, and they've all got orders to fire if anything happens to us. Seraphina's expression went cold. You're bluffing. Try me. Rhea's finger hovered over the detonator. I've already lost 37 wolves this week. What's a few dozen more if it means taking you down with us? The standoff stretched. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And then Kyle did the last thing anyone expected. He walked forward and stood between Lyra and Seraphina's fighters, raised his empty hands. Enough. His voice carried alpha command. I'm the one you want, Seraphina. I'm the one who fed you bad intelligence, who gave you access codes that were compromised, who's been playing you and the Syndicate against each other this whole time. What are you doing? Lyra hissed. What I should have done a year ago. Kale didn't look at her, taking responsibility. He faced Seraphina. You want revenge? Take it. Kill me. Let everyone else walk away. Seraphina tilted her head. And why would I settle for just you when I can have everything? Because if you don't, the Blood Moon Summit in 2 days becomes very interesting. Kale's voice was steady.
I've already sent evidence of your father's treaty violations to every major pack. The weapons trafficking, the territory grabs, all of it. The only thing keeping that information from going public is a dead man's switch tied to my heartbeat. You're lying, am I? Test it. Kill me and find out.
The silence was deafening. Then Serafina laughed. You magnificent bastard. You actually grew a spine. Too late to matter. But yes, Kale's eyes were hollow. So here's the deal. You let the syndicate walk away. You release your claim on Vale territory, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure that evidence never sees daylight. My pack becomes neutral ground. No alliances. No threats to you. And if I refuse,
then we all die here, and the entire supernatural world learns what your family really is. Kale's jaw was set. Your choice. Serafina stared at him for a long, terrible moment. Then she gestured to her fighters. Stand down. Alpha, one of them protested. I said stand down. Her voice cracked like a whip. The weapons lowered, slowly, reluctantly. Serafina locked eyes with Lyra. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. You've already lost. Have I? Serafina smiled. Because from where I'm standing, I've got everything I wanted. The syndicate is broken. You're bleeding out. And Kael's just signed away any chance at a real future to protect people who'll never appreciate it. She turned and walked toward the exit. See you at the summit. Her fighters followed, carrying their wounded. Within minutes, the factory was empty except for the syndicate forces and Kael. Rhea lowered the detonator. The snipers were a bluff. We barely had enough people to cover the exits. I know. Kael's shoulders sagged. But she didn't. Lyra wanted to hate him, wanted to rage and scream about how his rescue attempt had nearly gotten them all killed. But looking at him now, seeing the absolute defeat carved into every line of his face, she felt nothing but exhaustion. Why? She asked. Why throw everything away? Because I owed you. Kael finally met her eyes. I know it doesn't fix anything, doesn't make up for what I did, but I couldn't stand by and watch you die because of my mistakes. Not again. So noble. Lyra's laugh was bitter. You just traded your pack's future for your guilt. I know, and I'd do it again. The words hung between them. Truth. Raw and painful and utterly pointless. Kira appeared at Lyra's side, medical kit in hand. We need to get that wound closed before you bleed out. Lyra nodded, started to turn away, then stopped. Kael. He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. Don't ever come near me again. Whatever debt you think you owed, it's paid. We're done. The hope died. Understood. Lyra walked away and didn't look back. Us. They made it back to the emergency shelter by nightfall. Kira stitched Lyra's gunshot wound while Rhea coordinated with their remaining forces. The 10 rescued prisoners were shaken but alive, and somehow, impossibly, they'd survived. But the cost was brutal. 42 dead total now. The compound gone. Their weapons cache destroyed. The syndicate was a shadow of what it had been. And in 2 days, the Blood Moon Summit would begin. We can't go. Silas said what everyone was thinking. We don't have the numbers. Serafina will be expecting us. That's exactly why we have to be there. Lyra's voice was steady despite the pain radiating from her side. She thinks we're broken, thinks we'll hide and lick our wounds. We show up at that summit, we prove we're still a threat. A threat to who? Kira's expression was grim. We barely escaped with our lives. To everyone. Lyra stood, ignoring the way her vision swam. The summit is where every pack will be watching, where alliances are made and broken. If we don't show up, the syndicate is finished. But if we walk in there like we own the place, like this week's losses were just a minor setback, we plant doubt, make them wonder what we're planning, make them afraid. It's a hell of a bluff. Rhea's eyes glittered, using fear as a weapon when we've got nothing to back it up. We've got something better than weapons. Lyra pulled up the tablet. We've got truth. And we've got timing. At the summit, we don't go after Serafina directly. We expose her father. Release all the evidence Kael was threatening to leak. Let the other packs tear the Blackwood family apart. And Kael? Silas asked quietly. He'll be destroyed too. Yes. Lyra's voice was hollow. He will. Because that was the price of survival in this world. Sometimes the people who saved you were the same people who had to burn. And mercy was just another word for weakness. Rhea smiled slowly. Now you're thinking like a true syndicate leader. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of being the one who gets sacrificed. Either way, Lyra knew one thing with absolute certainty. In 2 days, at the Blood Moon Summit, she would stand before every major pack and show them exactly what happened when you tried to destroy Selene Frost. She would stand in that hall not as the rejected mate, not as the broken girl who'd jumped off a cliff to escape her pain, but as the wolf who'd crawled out of hell and learned to make weapons from her scars. And when it was over, every alpha in that room would remember her name. Not because she'd asked them to, but because they'd be too terrified to forget. The Blood Moon Summit was held in the Grand Hall of Arbitration, a cathedral of stone and ancient power built when the first wolf packs learned to stop killing each other long enough to talk. Stained glass windows depicted legendary battles. The ceiling soared 3 stories high, and in the center, a massive round table where alphas had been negotiating territory and treaties for 200 years. Lyra stood outside the entrance at dawn, watching the early arrivals filter in. Her ribs still ached from the gunshot wound. Her shoulder was wrapped tight enough to restrict movement. Every breath reminded her that she'd come within inches of dying in that factory. But she was here, standing, breathing, refusing to disappear. Rhea appeared beside her, dressed in formal leathers that somehow made her look more dangerous instead of civilized. "You ready for this?" "No." Lyra's voice was quiet. "But that's never stopped me before." "Good. Because once we walk through those doors, there's no going back. Every alpha in that room will be measuring us, waiting to see if we're still a threat or just corpses that haven't stopped moving yet. Then let's make sure they see exactly what they need to." Lyra straightened her spine despite the pain. "We're not broken. We're not desperate. We're the syndicate, and we eat wolves like them for breakfast." Rhea's smile was sharp. "Now you sound like me." They walked in together. The grand hall fell silent as they entered. Every head turned. Every eye tracked them across the marble floor to their designated seats. Lyra could feel the weight of their stares, calculating, assessing, searching for weakness. She gave them nothing, just moved with the same predatory grace she'd spent a year perfecting, sat down like she owned the chair, met every stare with cold disinterest. Across the table, Serafina watched with barely concealed rage. The wound in her side was probably still fresh. Her pride was definitely still bleeding. But she kept her expression neutral, playing the role of composed Luna. And beside her, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past week, sat Kael. His eyes found Lyra's. Held. Something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not even understanding, just acknowledgement. 2 people who'd destroyed each other and somehow kept breathing anyway. Lyra looked away first, because whatever they'd had was dead, and she was done mourning ghosts. The summit began. The first hour was procedural, territory disputes, trade agreements, the kind of political theater that kept packs from outright war. Lyra listened with half her attention while studying the room's dynamics. The Blackwood pack controlled the eastern bloc, 5 smaller packs who'd aligned with them for protection. Serafina's father, Alpha Dominic Blackwood, sat at the head of that contingent, 70 years old and still carrying himself like a warlord. His eyes were flat and calculating as he watched the proceedings. Kael sat with the northern representatives, isolated, weakened. His beta was conspicuously absent, probably dead or defected. The wolves around him kept their distance like failure was contagious, and scattered throughout were the neutral parties, packs too small to matter individually, but collectively holding enough votes to swing major decisions. The syndicate had no official vote. They were observers, consultants, the power behind the throne rather than on it. Which meant when Rhea stood to address the assembly, every wolf in the room went still. "Honorable alphas," Rhea's voice carried without effort. "I come before you today not to air grievances, but to present evidence of treaty violations that threaten the stability of all our territories." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Dominic Blackwood's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. "This is neither the time nor place for syndicate accusations," he said smoothly. "We're here to discuss legitimate pack business." "I agree. Which is why I'm bringing this to the Council's attention rather than handling it through other channels." Rhea gestured, and Silas stepped forward with a tablet. Over the past 18 months, the Blackwood Pack has been running weapons across neutral territories, selling to packs under embargo, violating the armistice accord signed by every alpha in this room.
Lies. Serafina stood, her voice cutting. The Syndicate is desperate to deflect from their own failures. They've lost half their forces, their compound is rubble, and now they're making wild accusations to stay relevant. Then you won't mind if we present the evidence. Lyra's voice was quiet, but it carried. Let the council decide if these are lies or facts.
She stood and took the tablet from Silas, approached the center of the table where a projection screen hung. Every step was measured, controlled. She could feel dozens of eyes tracking her movement, trying to place her. Most of these alphas had never seen Celine Frost in person. To them, she was a rumor, a shadow. She was about to become very real. Lyra brought up the first document: shipping manifests, encrypted communication logs, financial records showing money moving through shell corporations. All of it traced back to Blackwood operations. This is from March. A shipment of military-grade weapons moved through neutral territory into Redwood Packlands. Redwood is under embargo for treaty violations. Yet somehow, they acquired enough firepower to execute a coup against their previous alpha. She pulled up another file. This is from June. 300,000 in arms sales to the Frost Ridge Pack, who used them to massacre their neighboring pack and seize their territory. One by one, she laid out the evidence. Each document was damning. Each transaction, a clear violation of laws designed to prevent exactly this kind of destabilization. And through it all, Dominic Blackwood sat perfectly still, but his knuckles were white where they gripped the armrest. When Lyra finished, the silence was absolute. Then Dominic laughed. It was a cold, dismissive sound. Very impressive. The Syndicate has always been skilled at forgery, but these documents prove nothing without authentication. They're authenticated. A new voice cut through the hall, and every head turned. Marcus Kane stood in the doorway. Elder of the Western Council, one of the few wolves whose word carried weight across all territories. He walked slowly to the center table, leaning on a cane that clicked against marble. I've spent the past 72 hours reviewing these files. Marcus's voice was gravelly with age, cross-referencing them with our own intelligence, and I can confirm every single transaction Syndicate has presented is legitimate. Dominic's expression finally cracked. That's impossible. You can't. I can. And I have. Marcus turned to address the full assembly. The Blackwood Pack has been systematically violating the armistice accords for over a year, selling weapons, destabilizing territories, all while sitting at this table and voting on matters of pack law. The hall erupted, alphas shouting, accusations flying, the carefully maintained civility dissolving into chaos. Serafina was on her feet, face twisted with rage. This is a setup. The Syndicate paid you off. Enough! Marcus slammed his cane against the floor, and the sound cracked like thunder. I've served this council for 50 years. My integrity is not for sale. He fixed Dominic with a stare that could melt steel. You have violated sacred treaties, endangered countless wolves, and you will answer for it. Dominic stood slowly. His composure was back, but underneath, Lyra could see the calculation. The man was cornered, and he knew it. If these charges are true, and I'm not conceding they are, then at worst I've engaged in free market commerce. Weapons sales are not illegal. They are when they violate embargoes and treaty restrictions. Marcus's voice was iron. The penalty for such violations is clear: immediate removal from the council, forfeiture of all territorial claims gained in the past 2 years, and substantial reparations to affected packs. The weight of that sentence landed like a hammer. Forfeiture meant the Blackwood Pack would lose nearly a third of their territory. Their power would collapse overnight. Dominic's eyes swept the room, searching for allies. Found none. Every alpha was either glaring at him or deliberately looking away. Nobody wanted to be associated with a treaty violation of this magnitude. Finally, his gaze landed on Kael, and something ugly flickered across his face. If we're discussing violations, perhaps we should address Alpha Draven's recent activities. Dominic's voice was smooth poison. I have evidence that he's been secretly negotiating with the Syndicate, providing them intelligence on pack operations, essentially committing treason against his own kind. Kael went rigid, But before he could respond, Lyra spoke. He was. At Seraphina's orders. Every eye snapped to her. Lyra pulled up another file. This one showing communication logs between Seraphina and Kael. The threats. The manipulation. The systematic destruction of Kael's authority within his own pack. Seraphina Blackwood has spent the past year turning Alpha Draven into a puppet, threatening his pack, forcing him to provide information to her father. And when he tried to resist, she orchestrated attacks that killed innocent wolves. Lyra met Seraphina's eyes across the table, including the attempt on my life a year ago. The words hung in the air like a blade. Seraphina's laugh was sharp. Your life? I don't even know who you are. Yes, you do. Lyra reached up and pulled the pins from her hair, letting it fall loose around her shoulders, changed her posture, let the mask of Celine Frost slip just enough to show the bones of the girl beneath, and she watched recognition dawn in Seraphina's eyes, watched horror replace rage. Lyra Vale. Seraphina's voice was barely a whisper. You're supposed to be dead. I was. For a while. Lyra's smile was cold. But I got better. The hall exploded into chaos again. Alphas demanding explanations. Wolves shouting over each other. The carefully orchestrated summit dissolving into mayhem. And in the center of it all, Kael stood frozen, staring at Lyra like he was seeing a ghost he'd prayed for and feared in equal measure. Marcus slammed his cane again. Order! We will have order! Slowly, the noise died down. Marcus looked at Lyra with something like respect. You've made serious accusations, Miss Vale. Do you have evidence to support them? All of it. Lyra brought up the final files, the ones detailing Seraphina's plot, the bribes to Kael's beta, the orders to start the fire, the systematic campaign to isolate and destroy anyone who threatened her power. By the time she finished, Seraphina was white-faced and shaking. These are lies, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Fabrications designed to... I have witnesses. Lyra gestured to the doorway. Wolves who were there, who helped execute your orders, who've agreed to testify in exchange for clemency. 3 wolves entered, former Blackwood enforcers. Their faces were grim as they took positions along the wall. Seraphina looked at her father. Dominic was already calculating, already planning his next move, and Lyra saw the exact moment he made his choice. He stood, addressed the council without looking at his daughter. It appears my daughter has engaged in unsanctioned activities. If she has indeed violated pack law, she will face appropriate consequences. But these are internal Blackwood matters and will be handled accordingly. He was throwing her to the wolves, sacrificing her to save himself. Seraphina's face crumpled. Father, you've embarrassed this family enough. Dominic's voice was ice. You will submit to council judgment, and you will accept whatever punishment they deem fit. The betrayal was brutal and absolute. And watching it, Lyra felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not vindication, pity. Because she knew exactly how it felt to be thrown away by someone you'd built your life around. Marcus was already conferring with the other council elders. When they finished, he addressed the assembly. Seraphina Blackwood, you are charged with conspiracy to commit murder, treaty violations, and abuse of alpha authority. The council finds sufficient evidence to warrant a full tribunal. You are hereby stripped of your Luna title and remanded to custody pending trial. Guards moved forward. Seraphina didn't resist, just stood there, hollow-eyed, as they bound her wrists. As they led her past Lyra, their eyes met one final time. I would have ruled better than you ever could, Seraphina said quietly. I would have been stronger. Maybe. Lyra's voice was soft. But strength without mercy is just cruelty, and cruelty always eats itself in the end. Seraphina was led away. Dominic Blackwood followed shortly after, his empire crumbling around him. And suddenly, the hall felt very quiet. The council took a recess. Lyra found herself standing alone on a balcony overlooking the valley. The morning sun was burning off the fog. Birds sang in the trees below. The world kept turning like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She'd stood in front of the most powerful alphas in the region and destroyed the people who'd tried to erase her. She'd proven that Lyra Vale wasn't dead, that she'd become something they couldn't ignore or intimidate or push aside. And somehow, it felt hollow. Because revenge was supposed to feel good, supposed to fill the empty spaces where love and trust used to live. But standing here, watching her enemies fall, all she felt was tired. I didn't know if you'd actually go through with it. Lyra turned to find Kael standing in the doorway. He looked awful, like he hadn't slept in days, like the weight of everything he'd done and failed to do was finally crushing him. You shouldn't be here, she said. I know, but I needed to say something before you disappear again. There's nothing left to say. There is. Kael stepped onto the balcony. I need you to know that I spent every day of the past year hating myself for what I did to you, searching for you, hoping you'd somehow survived. And when I saw you at that summit, when I realized what you'd become. What? A monster? Lyra's laugh was bitter. A weapon? That's all I am now, Kael. All I know how to be. No, you're a survivor. Kael's voice cracked. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and forged it into power. You protected your people. You brought down wolves who deserved to fall, and you did it without losing the core of who you are. You don't know who I am anymore. Maybe not. But I know you had every right to destroy me in there, to expose me as a coward and a traitor. And you didn't. You could have ruined me, but instead you showed the council exactly what Serafina did. You let the truth speak for itself. That's not something a monster does. Lyra was quiet, because he wasn't wrong. Could have burned him, could have made him the villain of her story. But standing there with all that power and all that rage, she'd realized something important. Destroying Kael wouldn't give her back the years she'd lost, wouldn't resurrect her mother, wouldn't heal the scars carved into her soul. It would just make her more like Serafina. I didn't do it for you, she said finally. I did it because I'm tired of letting other people's choices define my life. You made yours. You have to live with that. But I'm done carrying the weight of your guilt. I understand. Kael's shoulders sagged. For what it's worth, don't. Lyra held up a hand. Don't apologize again. Don't tell me you wish things were different. Just move forward. Be better. Protect your pack. And let me go. The words landed like a final blow. Kael nodded slowly. Goodbye, Lyra. Goodbye, Kael. He walked away. And this time, Lyra felt something shift inside her chest. Not healing. Not yet. But the beginning of it. The first fragile sense that maybe she could stop defining herself by what had been taken from her and start building something new from what remained. The summit reconvened for final votes. The Blackwood Pack's territories were redistributed. Dominic was removed from the council, and a dozen smaller resolutions were passed to strengthen the treaties his violations had weakened. Through it all, Lyra sat beside Rhea and watched the machinery of pack politics grind forward. It was brutal and efficient and utterly impersonal. But it was also necessary, because this was how wolves survived. Not through individual strength or dominance, but through alliances, through laws that protected the weak and constrained the powerful, through the collective agreement that some lines couldn't be crossed without consequences. When it was over, Marcus approached their table. That was well done, he said. Both the presentation and the restraint. Many in your position would have pushed for blood. I got what I came for. Lyra stood. Justice, not revenge. There's a difference? Marcus's eyes twinkled. There is. Revenge is about destroying the other person. Justice is about restoring balance. Lyra met his gaze. I'm not interested in destruction anymore. Good. Because the council has a proposition for you. Marcus gestured to a quieter corner of the hall. If you have a moment. They moved away from the crowd. Marcus pulled out a document. The syndicate's reputation has been damaged, but today proved you're still a force to be reckoned with. The council would like to offer you an official position. Arbiter of neutral disputes. You'd have the authority to investigate treaty violations and mediate conflicts before they escalate to violence. Why would you trust the syndicate with that kind of power? Because you proved today that you can wield power without abusing it. Marcus's voice was serious. And because, frankly, we need someone who isn't beholden to any pack. Someone who'll tell uncomfortable truths regardless of who it offends. Lyra looked at Rhea, her mentor, her savior, the woman who'd taught her everything about survival in this brutal world. Rhea smiled. Take it. The syndicate will survive whether you're running missions or sitting in council chambers. But this?
This is a chance to actually change things, to make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to the next wolf who gets thrown away. It was tempting. The idea of having real authority, of being able to protect wolves like her younger self. But it was also a trap, because power always demanded compromise, always asked you to choose between your principles and your survival. I need time to think about it, Lyra said finally. Of course. Marcus handed her the document. You have until the winter summit to decide, but I hope you'll accept. We need wolves like you. He walked away, leaving Lyra holding a future she'd never imagined. That night, the Syndicate forces gathered in a private room Rhea had secured. 23 wolves, all that remained of an organization that had once numbered over 60. They looked exhausted, battered, but alive. Rhea raised a glass. To the fallen. May they hunt in better territories than this. To the fallen, the group echoed. They drank in silence, each one remembering the faces of wolves who weren't there. Friends, partners, family. Then Rhea looked at Lyra. You want to say something? Lyra hadn't prepared a speech, didn't have pretty words to make the losses hurt less. But looking at these wolves, these survivors who'd fought beside her and bled for her, she knew she owed them honesty. A year ago, I was a different person, weaker, more naive. I thought strength came from being chosen, from being loved by the right people, from fitting into the space someone else made for you. She set down her glass. This past year taught me that real strength comes from choosing yourself, from building your own space in a world that wants you to stay small and quiet and grateful for scraps.
Several wolves nodded. They understood. Most of them had similar stories: rejection, betrayal, survival against odds that should have broken them. We lost people. Lyra's voice roughened. Good wolves who deserved better than dying in a compound fire or a factory shootout. And I can't stand here and tell you their deaths meant something. Can't promise that what we're building is worth that price. She met each of their eyes. But I can promise that we won't forget them. Won't let their sacrifice be for nothing. We're going to rebuild, stronger, smarter. And we're going to make sure the next wolf who gets thrown away has somewhere to land that isn't a river or a grave. The room was silent. Then Kira stood. To Celine Frost, she said, "Who taught us that survival isn't about staying alive? It's about refusing to stay dead." To Celine, the group echoed, and Lyra felt something warm bloom in her chest. Not pride, not quite, but belonging. The sense that she'd found her pack, not through birth or ceremony or some alpha's approval, but through shared scars and mutual survival. 3 days later, Lyra stood on a hilltop overlooking the remains of the Syndicate compound. The fire had gutted the main buildings, collapsed the walls, turned everything she'd worked for into charred rubble. But in the wreckage, she could see green shoots, grass pushing through concrete, wildflowers blooming in the ashes, nature reclaiming what had been taken, life persisting despite destruction. "You're not going to take the council position, are you?" Lyra turned to find Rhea approaching. The older woman moved slowly, favoring her injured ribs. "I don't know yet." "Yes, you do." Rhea stood beside her, looking at the ruins. "You've never been good at lying to yourself. It's one of your better qualities. I just watched people tear each other apart for power. Watched Dominic sacrifice his own daughter to save his reputation. Watched Kael destroy everything he cared about because he couldn't choose between competing loyalties." Lyra's voice was quiet. "I'm not sure I want to be part of that world." "Then don't be. Build something different." "How?" "By remembering what you said in that speech, about giving rejected wolves a place to land." Rhea gestured to the compound. "We're rebuilding anyway. Why not rebuild as something new? Not just an intelligence syndicate, but a sanctuary, a place where wolves who've been cast out can find protection, training, purpose, a pack for the packless." "Exactly." Rhea's smile was genuine. "You've been trying to decide if you're a weapon or a leader, but you're both. And that's what makes you dangerous in the best possible way." Lyra thought about it. Thought about all the wolves she'd met over the past year, the ones who'd been exiled for being too weak or too different, who'd committed crimes out of desperation, who'd simply been in the wrong place when powerful people needed scapegoats. What if we could give them a choice? Not just survival, but transformation. Training that made them strong enough to write their own stories. We'd need resources, territory. Ria was already calculating, and we'd need to convince the council that we're not training an army of rogues. I think Marcus would support it, especially if we tied it to the arbiter position. I take the council role, use the authority to protect refugees and investigate abuses, and the syndicate becomes the implementation arm. We don't just report violations, we provide solutions. It's ambitious. Ria studied her. You've changed. I had to. Lyra looked at the ruins. The old version of me would have died in that fire, or that factory, or any of the 100 times someone tried to erase me. But the version standing here, she knows that survival isn't enough. We have to build something worth surviving for. Ria was quiet for a long moment. Then she extended her hand. Partners? Lyra took it. Partners. 6 months later, Lyra stood in front of a new building. Not a compound this time, something that looked more like a university campus. Dormitories? Training facilities? Libraries filled with law books and strategy manuals and histories of the supernatural world. The Crescent Haven. That's what they'd named it. A place where wolves could come to rebuild themselves. To learn that rejection wasn't the end of their story, 50 wolves had enrolled in the first class. Some were young. Some were old. All of them carried scars. And all of them had found their way here because someone had told them about the Luna who died and come back stronger. Lyra walked through the campus, watching trainees run obstacle courses, listening to lectures on pack law, observing meditation sessions designed to help wolves integrate their human and animal selves. It was chaotic, messy, nothing like the brutal efficiency of the old syndicate. It was perfect. She found Kira teaching a combat class. Silas was running logistics. Ria was in her office, coordinating with council representatives about expansion plans. Everyone had found their place, even Lyra. She split her time between the Haven and council duties, investigating treaty violations, mediating disputes, making sure the powerful couldn't crush the weak without consequences. It was exhausting, frustrating. Some days she wondered if she was making any difference at all. But then she'd see a wolf who'd arrived broken and terrified start to stand straighter, start to believe they deserved to take up space, and she'd remember why this mattered. One afternoon, a young female wolf arrived. Maybe 18, bruised face, haunted eyes, the kind of look Lyra recognized immediately. She'd been rejected by her mate, cast out of her pack, left to die. Lyra sat with her in the intake office, listened to her story without judgment. When the girl finished, she looked at Lyra with desperate hope. Can you really teach me to be strong? To be someone they can't hurt anymore? Lyra thought about that question, about the years she'd spent learning to fight and kill and manipulate, about the power she'd accumulated and the price she'd paid for it. We can teach you to survive, she said carefully, to defend yourself, to recognize manipulation and resist it. But real strength? That's not about being untouchable. It's about being resilient, about knowing you can be hurt and choosing to stay open anyway. The girl looked confused. I don't understand. You will. Lyra stood. Give it time, and trust the process. On the anniversary of the night she'd jumped from the cliffs, Lyra returned to that spot, stood at the edge looking down at the river that had almost killed her. It looked different now. Less terrifying, just water flowing over rocks, nature doing what it always did, wearing down obstacles and moving forward. She heard footsteps behind her, turned to find Kyle standing at a respectful distance. They hadn't spoken since the summit, hadn't needed to. Their lives had diverged. He was rebuilding the Veil Pack. She was building something entirely new. But seeing him here on this specific night, she understood. He'd come to bear witness, to acknowledge what had happened on this spot. I come here sometimes, he said quietly, to remind myself of what I almost destroyed. Why? Because forgetting would be easier, and I don't deserve easy. Kale's eyes were haunted. I've spent a year trying to be better, trying to lead with integrity instead of fear. But every decision I make, I wonder if it's the right one, or if I'm just fooling myself again. Lyra was quiet. Then she spoke. There was a time I would have enjoyed watching you suffer, would have felt vindicated knowing you were tormented by guilt. But standing here now, I just feel tired. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't change anything. But I believe you mean it. Lyra looked at the river. I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness, about whether I owe it to you or to myself, whether letting go means you get off easy. What did you decide? That forgiveness isn't about you. It's about me refusing to carry your mistakes anymore. She turned to face him. I forgive you, KL, not because you deserve it, but because I'm tired of letting what you did define who I am. KL's eyes filled. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just be better. Protect your wolves. Make choices you can live with. And if you ever see a wolf getting thrown away because they don't fit someone's idea of useful, remember this moment. I will. I swear it. Good. They stood in silence, watching the sun set over the valley. Two people who destroyed each other and somehow survived. Finally, Kael spoke. For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've built. The Haven. Your council work. You're changing things.
So are you. Lyra's voice was soft. Your pack is stronger than it was. More just. You're proving you can lead without cruelty. We're both trying to atone, aren't we? Kael smiled sadly. Trying to make up for the wolves we were. Maybe. Or maybe we're just trying to become the wolves we should have been all along. Kael nodded. Then he turned to leave. Paused. Will I see you again?
At council meetings? Summit negotiations. Lyra's eyes were clear, but not like before. We're not those people anymore. No, we're not. He walked away. And Lyra let him go without regret, without longing, just acceptance that some chapters ended so new ones could begin. 2 years after the summit, Lyra received an invitation. The Veil Pack was hosting a ceremony. A new Luna was being bonded, not Kael's mate. He'd chosen to remain unbonded, to lead alone. But his younger brother had found a partner, a strong-willed female from a neighboring pack who'd proven herself in battle and negotiation. The ceremony would be different from traditional bondings, more egalitarian, a celebration of partnership rather than possession. Lyra almost didn't go. But Rhea convinced her. Show them how far you've come. Show them that rejected mates don't just survive, they thrive. So Lyra attended, wore formal silks in silver and black, arrived with a delegation from the Haven, wolves who'd rebuilt themselves and wanted to witness this new model of bonding. The ceremony was beautiful. The young couple spoke vows that emphasized mutual respect, equal partnership. The pack cheered with genuine joy instead of political calculation. And when it was over, Kael approached her. Thank you for coming, he said. It means more than you know. Your brother chose well. Lyra smiled. She'll keep him honest. She will. Kael's expression was warm. You've changed things, you know, the way we do bonding ceremonies, the questions we ask about consent and partnership. Half the packs in the region have adopted similar reforms because of you. Not because of me, because of wolves brave enough to demand better. Maybe. But you showed them it was possible. Kael hesitated. There's something I wanted to give you. He handed her a small wooden box. Inside was a pendant, silver worked into the shape of a wolf mid-leap. The craftsmanship was exquisite. I had it made from the moonstone thread of the dress, the one from our ceremony. Kael's voice was rough. I kept it all these years. Couldn't bring myself to destroy it or give it away. But recently I realized it doesn't belong to the past. It belongs to you, to what you've become. Lyra lifted the pendant. It caught the light, throwing silver reflections. It's beautiful. It's freedom. Kael met her eyes. You took the worst thing I ever did to you and transformed it into something precious. That's not just survival. That's art. Lyra felt tears prick her eyes. She'd spent so long being angry, being strong, being untouchable, but holding this piece of her past, remade into something beautiful, she finally felt the last chains break. Thank you, she whispered. No. Kael's smile was genuine. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. Awesome. On the 5th anniversary of her death and rebirth, Lyra stood before an assembly of 200 wolves. The Crescent Haven had grown beyond her wildest expectations. They'd opened branches in 3 territories, trained over 500 wolves, changed laws, saved lives. And today, they were dedicating a memorial. It was a simple stone monument, carved with names. Every wolf who'd been rejected, exiled, or cast out and hadn't survived to find refuge. Everyone who'd died alone and afraid and believing they were worthless. Lyra read the names aloud. All 47 of them gave them the dignity they'd been denied in life. When she finished, she spoke to the gathered crowd. These wolves died believing they were failures. That being rejected made them less. That power and belonging only came from someone else choosing them. She touched the monument. We stand here today because we refuse to let their stories end in shame. Because we've learned that the most dangerous lie we're ever told is that our worth depends on someone else's approval. Around her, wolves nodded. Some were crying. All of them understood. The haven exists to prove that rejection is not the end. It's a beginning. The moment when you stop living someone else's story and start writing your own. Lyra's voice strengthened. Some of you came here broken, terrified, convinced you'd never be strong enough to matter. And now you're training the next generation, teaching them that strength isn't about domination. It's about resilience, about choosing courage even when it would be easier to surrender. She paused. Let the words settle. We honor the fallen by living, by refusing to let their deaths be meaningless, by building a world where the next rejected wolf has somewhere to turn, someone to believe in them when they can't believe in themselves. The assembly was silent. Then one wolf began to howl, then another, then all of them. A chorus that rose to the sky, mourning the dead, celebrating the living, promising that the work would continue. And Lyra stood in the center of it all, feeling finally, completely whole. Not because she'd gotten revenge, not because she'd proven herself to anyone, but because she'd learned the hardest lesson of all, that her worth had never depended on Kyle choosing her, had never been tied to a Luna title or a ceremony or anyone's approval. It had always been there, waiting for her to claim it. That night, alone in her office, Lyra pulled out the pendant Kyle had given her, held it up to the light, watched it spin and glitter, then she fastened it around her neck, wore it like armor, like a reminder. She'd been broken, had died in that river, had crawled out of hell and learned to make weapons from her scars. But she'd also learned mercy, forgiveness, the strength that came from building instead of destroying. She was Lyra Vale, Celine Frost, the rejected mate who'd become a queen not through dominance, but through stubborn, relentless refusal to stay down. And when she looked in the mirror now, she finally recognized the wolf staring back. Not a victim, not a weapon, not someone else's mistake, just a woman who'd survived the unsurvivable and decided to spend the rest of her life making sure others could do the same. She smiled. It was small, but real. Then she turned off the light and walked into the future she'd fought so hard to build. The girl who'd stood at that altar in a white dress was dead, but the woman who'd risen from her ashes was just getting started. And this time, no one would ever mistake her for something they could throw away.